At the edge of what we think we know, the past is still speaking, and sometimes it whispers in riddles. Across deserts, jungles, and ocean floors, archaeologists have uncovered artifacts that refuse to fit our timelines, structures that defy known engineering, and markings that seem to carry messages no one can translate. Are these the remnants of forgotten genius, natural phenomena misunderstood, or clues to chapters of human history we've erased? Tonight, we descend into hours of bizarre, unexplained archaeological mysteries, evidence that challenges our certainty and dares us to look closer. Stay with us as each discovery pulls back the veil. In the wide, sun-bleached basin of Wadi as-Sufra, surrounded by low sandstone hills and dry savanna, the stone structures of Musawwarat rise with quiet complexity. From a distance, the ruins seem scattered and irregular, as if shaped by the landscape itself. But as one moves closer, a different picture emerges. Massive walls, winding corridors, broad courtyards, and carefully laid ramps form a labyrinthine complex unlike anything else in the ancient Nile world. This is Musawwarat as-Sufra, a Meroitic sanctuary in what is now Sudan, built more than 2,000 years ago, far from the Nile, in a place with no permanent water source. At the heart of the site stands the Great Enclosure, a vast architectural puzzle covering tens of thousands of square meters. Its layout is dense and intricate. Narrow passageways open into wide courts, low walls block direct lines of sight, and ramps connect different levels of the complex. Archaeologists have noted that no close parallel exists for this design anywhere else in Nubia or ancient Egypt. It is not a simple temple, not a palace, and not a fortress. Instead, it feels intentionally disorienting, as though movement through the space was meant to be controlled, guided, or even ritualized. Why build such a complicated structure in such a remote place? One practical answer lies in water. Musawwarat contains some of the largest ancient reservoirs, or hafirs, known in Sudan. The Great Hafir alone was capable of holding enormous volumes of rainwater, allowing the site to function far from the Nile. This suggests careful planning and advanced knowledge of water management in an arid environment. Water ducts once carried stored rainwater toward key areas of the complex, supporting people, animals, and possibly plants. From a conventional perspective, these reservoirs made large-scale construction and long-term activity possible in an otherwise inhospitable setting. Yet water alone does not explain the purpose of Musawwarat. The site is filled with carvings and graffiti, many depicting elephants, lions, and other animals. The nearby lion temple of Apetimak, dedicated to a local warrior deity, suggests that Musawwarat was closely tied to religious life in the kingdom of Kush. Some scholars propose that the Great Enclosure functioned as a major pilgrimage center, a sacred landscape rather than a conventional city. The lack of evidence for large permanent settlements supports this view. People may have come here for specific ceremonies, festivals, or rituals, then departed. Still, certain features resist easy interpretation. The prominence of elephants has led to long-standing speculation. One early theory suggested that Musawwarat may have been an elephant training center, possibly for war or ceremonial use. The size of the courtyards, the strength of the walls, and the abundance of elephant imagery seemed to support this idea. While many modern researchers consider this unlikely or unproven, the theory persists, partly because no alternative explanation fully accounts for the site's unusual layout and symbolism. More speculative ideas go further. Some have wondered whether Musawwarat served as a kind of ancient knowledge center, a place where religious, astronomical, or initiatory practices were carried out in carefully designed spaces. The maze-like architecture, with its controlled movement and enclosed areas, could be seen as symbolic rather than purely functional. Others have suggested that certain parts of the complex were designed to separate different groups of people or to stage processions whose meaning has been lost to time. What makes Musawwarat so compelling is not just what we know, but how much remains uncertain. The stones clearly reflect advanced planning, cultural significance, and long-term use. Yet the true purpose of the great enclosure and the full meaning of its design remains open to interpretation. Was it primarily a sanctuary, a ritual landscape, a center for elite activity, or something more complex that no single label can capture? As wind moves through the broken corridors and sunlight traces the outlines of ancient walls, Musawwarat seems to hold its secrets carefully. Each theory explains part of the picture, but none resolves it completely. And so the question remains: what did this remote, monumental complex truly mean to the people who built it? And what understanding of their world has been lost among these silent stones? From the remote stone corridors of Musawwarat, where purpose and symbolism blur into uncertainty, our journey now shifts northward, across seas and centuries, to a landscape where some of humanity's earliest permanent communities quietly took shape. Here, in the rolling plains of Thessaly, Greece, low hills rise gently from fertile soil. On one of these hills, overlooking fields that have been cultivated for thousands of years, lies the ancient settlement of Sesklo. At first glance, Sesklo appears modest. There are no towering pyramids, no massive megaliths, no monumental temples dominating the horizon. Instead, what remains are stone foundations, circular and rectangular building outlines, and layers of earth that conceal one of Europe's most important Neolithic sites. Yet beneath this quiet surface lies evidence of a cultural and technological sophistication that continues to challenge simple explanations. Sesklo was first occupied around the 7th millennium BCE, making it among the earliest known farming communities in Europe. Its inhabitants practiced agriculture, domesticated animals, and built permanent structures at a time when much of the continent was still dominated by small, mobile, hunter-gatherer groups. This sudden appearance of settled life raises a foundational question. How did farming, architecture, and complex social organization spread so quickly into this region? Mainstream archaeology points to migration and cultural diffusion from Anatolia and the Near East, where agriculture had developed earlier. According to this view, groups of early farmers gradually moved westward, bringing with them seeds, livestock, and building traditions. Sesklo, in this framework, becomes part of a larger wave of Neolithic expansion, one link in a chain of human adaptation and innovation. But the material remains at Sesklo suggest more than simple copying. The architecture shows deliberate planning. Homes were constructed with stone foundations and mud brick walls, arranged in organized clusters rather than random placement. Some structures appear larger and more carefully built than others, hinting at social distinctions or specialized functions. There is evidence of plastered floors and painted surfaces, suggesting that aesthetics and symbolism mattered, even in these early stages of settled life. The pottery of Sesklo is particularly striking. Finely crafted, often decorated with bold red and white designs, it reflects a level of artistic expression that seems advanced for such an early period. These vessels were not merely functional containers, they appear to carry cultural meaning. Patterns repeat across sites in the region, suggesting shared traditions and communication between communities. How such symbolic systems developed so early, and how they spread so consistently, remains an area of active study. Beyond the visible structures, layers of ash, refuse, and rebuilding tell a story of long-term occupation. Sesklo was not a short-lived experiment. It endured for centuries, growing and changing over time. This continuity suggests stability, cooperation, and an ability to manage resources effectively. Yet managing early agricultural life was not simple. Farming brought new risks: crop failure, disease, and dependence on seasonal cycles. The success of Sesklo implies knowledge systems about climate, soil, and plant behavior that are difficult to fully reconstruct from stone tools and broken pottery. Some researchers have noted that Sesklo appears to have been more than just a village. Its size and central location may have made it a regional hub, influencing smaller nearby settlements. This raises the possibility of early forms of leadership, ritual authority, or economic control. Were certain families or groups responsible for organizing planting, storage, or trade? Did Sesklo function as a ceremonial center as well as a residential one? The archaeological record offers hints, but few definitive answers. There is also the question of sudden change. Around the middle of the 5th millennium BCE, the Sesklo culture appears to decline or transform, replaced in some areas by different cultural patterns. The reasons for this shift are still debated. Climate fluctuations, resource depletion, social conflict, or external pressures may all have played a role. Some layers show signs of burning, which could indicate accidental fires, or something more deliberate. Was Sesklo abandoned gradually, or did its end come more abruptly than we can clearly see? More speculative perspectives focus on the speed and coordination of Neolithic development itself. The rapid emergence of similar farming communities across wide regions has led some to wonder whether early knowledge transfer was more organized than traditionally assumed. Could there have been networks of communication, shared teaching methods, or even traveling specialists who spread agricultural and architectural techniques? While mainstream archaeology explains this through slow migration and cultural contact, the precise mechanisms remain difficult to trace in detail. Others look at Sesklo as part of a deeper mystery, the origins of settled civilization in Europe. The leap from mobile foraging to permanent architecture, symbolic pottery, and structured communities represents a profound transformation in human life. How much of this change was driven by necessity, and how much by choice? Did people fully understand the long-term consequences of farming, population growth, social stratification, and environmental pressure? Or were they stepping into a future they could not yet imagine? Even the layout of the settlement invites quiet speculation. The positioning of buildings, open spaces, and pathways may reflect social rules that are now invisible. Certain areas could have been reserved for gatherings, rituals, or decision-making. Without written records, these social dimensions can only be inferred, leaving room for multiple interpretations. What appears as a simple stone foundation today may once have been the center of daily life, storytelling, belief, and identity. In this way, Sesklo becomes more than an archaeological site. It becomes a window into a moment when humanity was redefining itself, experimenting with permanence, reshaping landscapes, and building traditions that would echo for thousands of years. Yet for all the data collected, for all the excavations and analyses, Sesklo still resists a complete narrative. As we move through the traces of walls and hearths, we are left to imagine voices that no longer speak and decisions whose consequences we still live with. The stones of Sesklo preserve evidence of innovation, but they also preserve silence. And in that silence, a lingering question remains. What deeper forces, environmental, social, or perhaps still unknown, guided these early builders to create a way of life that would change the course of human history? From the early farming fields of Sesklo, where permanent settlement quietly reshaped human life, the story now moves west, toward a harsher landscape, where stone and earth were shaped not only for living, but for defense. Here, in the dry hills of southeastern Spain, overlooking the Andarax River Valley, the remains of Los Millares rise against a backdrop of wind-carved ridges and pale, sun-washed soil. What appears today as a series of low walls and eroded embankments once formed one of the most complex fortified settlements of Copper Age Europe. Los Millares dates to roughly the late 4th and early 3rd millennium BCE, a time when metalworking, long-distance trade, and social hierarchy were beginning to transform communities across the Iberian Peninsula. Unlike the open village patterns seen at earlier Neolithic sites, Los Millares was built with clear attention to protection. Multiple concentric stone walls encircle the central settlement, reinforced by towers and narrow gate passages. Beyond the main enclosure, a chain of outlying forts extends across nearby ridges, creating a layered defensive network that seems far more elaborate than what is typically expected for this period. At the heart of the site, the inner enclosure once held houses, storage areas, and communal spaces. The walls were constructed from stone and earth, carefully fitted and thick enough to withstand sustained pressure. The gates are narrow and angled, forcing anyone entering to slow and turn, features that suggest deliberate planning against intrusion. From a practical standpoint, archaeologists interpret these defenses as a response to rising competition over resources, trade routes, or territory. As copper metallurgy spread, so too may have conflict, making protection a growing concern. Yet the scale of Los Millares raises deeper questions. The settlement was not simply defended, it was engineered as a fortress landscape. The outer forts, positioned on high ground, would have provided early warning and control over movement through the valley. Coordinating such a system would have required organized labor, leadership, and long-term planning. This suggests a level of social complexity that challenges older views of Copper Age societies as small, loosely structured communities. Nearby, hundreds of collective tombs, stone-built tholoi, dot the surrounding terrain. These circular burial chambers, often reused over generations, reflect shared mortuary traditions and strong connections between the living settlement and the ancestral dead. Grave goods found within some tombs, including copper tools, ornaments, and exotic materials, point to social differentiation and long-distance exchange networks. Items such as ivory and certain types of stone appear to have traveled hundreds, even thousands of kilometers before reaching Los Millares. This raises the possibility that the settlement was not just a defensive stronghold, but also a key node in broader economic and cultural systems. Mainstream interpretations suggest that Los Millares grew in response to increasing population density and competition. As more people settled in the region, access to fertile land, water, and trade routes may have become more tightly controlled. Fortifications, in this view, reflect practical concerns, protecting surplus, safeguarding families, and deterring rival groups. The walls become a material expression of changing social realities, a world in which cooperation and conflict existed side by side. But some aspects remain difficult to fully explain. The sheer number of defensive lines, combined with the outlying forts, seems excessive for a community of this size. Were the threats truly so constant and severe, or did the fortifications serve additional, less obvious purposes? Some researchers have suggested that the walls may have carried symbolic meaning as well as military function, marking territory, reinforcing group identity, or demonstrating power to both outsiders and insiders. There is also the question of how such construction was achieved. Building multiple stone walls and remote forts would have required sustained labor over many years. This implies systems of organization, authority, and possibly obligation that are hard to trace archaeologically. Were people compelled to work, motivated by shared threat, or driven by ritual or social expectation? The stones themselves offer no clear answer, yet their arrangement speaks of coordination on a scale that feels surprisingly modern. More speculative perspectives consider Los Millares within a broader pattern of early fortification across Europe and the Mediterranean. Similar defensive sites appear in different regions around the same time, raising questions about whether ideas of warfare, territoriality, and organized defense spread through contact, or emerged independently in response to shared pressures. Could there have been a wider cultural shift toward fortified living, one that we only partially understand through scattered ruins? Some fringe interpretations go further, suggesting that the fortifications may have been designed for threats that were not purely human: environmental disasters, large-scale migrations, or social collapses that left deep psychological marks. While there is no direct evidence for such scenarios, the emotional weight of the architecture, the sense of enclosure, surveillance, and control, invites reflection on the fears and uncertainties of the people who lived here. Even the placement of Los Millares invites curiosity. The settlement commands views of the surrounding valley, yet it is also exposed to harsh winds and limited water sources. Choosing such a location suggests that strategic concerns may have outweighed comfort. This trade-off hints at a world where safety, perception, and control were becoming central to daily life. Today, as the walls erode and the forts blend into the hills, Los Millares feels both silent and watchful. Its stones still outline a landscape shaped by caution and planning, by connection and separation. The fortifications stand as evidence of a society navigating new technologies, new pressures, and new forms of organization. Yet they also leave behind unanswered questions. Were these walls built mainly to keep enemies out, or to hold a changing community together? Did they protect people from real and constant danger, or did they also serve to define identity, power, and belonging? As with so many ancient sites, Los Millares offers structure without certainty, and in the shadow of its broken towers, we are left to wonder what invisible forces once made these defenses feel not just necessary, but essential. From the fortified hills of Los Millares, where stone walls rose in response to pressure, conflict, and changing social realities, the journey now moves far to the east, into the wide river valleys of Central Asia. Here, at the edge of the Zarafshan River in what is now modern Tajikistan, a different kind of ancient complexity emerges. The land is open, the horizons broad, framed by distant mountains and fertile floodplains. Beneath this quiet landscape lies Sarazm, a prehistoric settlement whose stone structures and layered remains speak of early urban life in a region long considered peripheral to the great centers of ancient civilization. At first glance, Sarazm does not announce itself with towering ruins. Its remains are low, spread across a wide area, blending into the earth. Excavated foundations reveal stone walls, rooms, hearths, and workspaces arranged in clusters. Yet this modest appearance conceals a settlement of remarkable antiquity and importance. Sarazm dates back to the late 4th millennium BCE, making it one of the earliest known proto-urban centers in Central Asia. Its very existence challenges older assumptions about where and how complex societies first developed. The name Sarazm is often translated as where the land begins, and in many ways it marks a beginning in archaeological understanding. The site shows evidence of planned architecture, specialized production, and long-distance trade at a surprisingly early date. Stone, mud brick, and carefully laid foundations suggest permanent construction rather than temporary habitation. These were not simple huts for seasonal use. They were buildings meant to last, arranged in ways that imply neighborhoods, workshops, and shared spaces. Archaeologists have identified areas dedicated to metalworking, pottery production, and stone tool manufacture. Copper objects, molds, and slag indicate early metallurgy, while finely crafted ceramics show stylistic links to distant regions. Materials found at Sarazm, including turquoise, lapis lazuli, and other semi-precious stones, appear to have traveled vast distances. Some likely came from regions hundreds or even thousands of kilometers away, pointing to trade networks that stretched across Central Asia and into what are now Iran, Afghanistan, and possibly beyond. Mainstream interpretations see Sarazm as a key node in early exchange systems, a place where raw materials, finished goods, and ideas converged. Its location near river routes and mountain passes would have made it a natural meeting point for traders and travelers. In this view, Sarazm's growth reflects economic opportunity, access to resources, control of movement, and the ability to connect distant cultures through commerce. But the complexity of Sarazm suggests more than trade alone. The size of the settlement, the diversity of its activities, and the apparent organization of space point toward emerging social structures. Some buildings appear larger or more substantial than others, possibly indicating differences in status or function. Storage areas hint at surplus production, while workshop zones suggest specialized labor. These features raise questions about leadership, decision-making, and social hierarchy. Who organized the work? Who controlled the flow of goods? And how were these early systems maintained? One of the more intriguing aspects of Sarazm is how early it appears to have reached this level of organization. In many traditional narratives of ancient history, Central Asia is seen as a corridor, important for movement, but not necessarily a center of early urban development. Sarazm complicates that picture. It suggests that complex, interconnected societies may have emerged independently in multiple regions, not only in the well-known river valleys of Mesopotamia, Egypt, or the Indus. Yet much about Sarazm remains uncertain. The stone structures themselves, while clearly functional, do not always reveal their full purpose. Some rooms may have served as living spaces, others as workshops, storage, or ceremonial areas. Without written records, these distinctions are based on material clues that can only tell part of the story. A hearth may indicate cooking or ritual. A large room may suggest communal gathering or elite residence. Each interpretation opens further questions. There is also the matter of cultural influence. Artifacts at Sarazm show similarities to objects from distant regions, suggesting contact and shared styles. But how direct were these connections? Did traders travel the entire distance themselves, or were goods passed through many hands, moving gradually from one community to another? And if ideas traveled with these materials, how did they transform as they moved across landscapes and cultures? Some researchers have proposed that Sarazm may represent an early form of urban planning, an experiment in organizing people, labor, and space on a scale larger than simple villages. If so, it raises the possibility that urbanism, as a concept, was not invented in a single place and then copied, but emerged in parallel across different regions. This challenges linear models of civilization and invites a more complex view of human innovation. More speculative perspectives look at Sarazm as part of a deeper, less visible network of early knowledge. The coordination required for metallurgy, long-distance trade, and architectural planning suggests shared standards and technical understanding. How were these skills taught and transmitted? Were there traveling specialists, metalworkers, builders, traders, who carried expertise from place to place? Or did communities independently arrive at similar solutions through experimentation and adaptation? There is also the question of why Sarazm eventually declined. Archaeological layers suggest changes in occupation over time, followed by reduced activity and eventual abandonment. Environmental factors, such as shifts in river patterns or climate, may have made the location less sustainable. Economic changes could have redirected trade routes elsewhere. Social transformations, conflict, reorganization, or migration may also have played a role. The exact reasons remain debated, with no single explanation fully accounting for the site's trajectory. Standing among the exposed stone foundations today, it is difficult to grasp the full life of Sarazm. The settlement once echoed with the sounds of hammering metal, shaping stone, firing pottery, and negotiating exchanges. People here were not isolated farmers or simple craftsmen, They were participants in a wide, interconnected world, shaping and being shaped by forces that stretched far beyond their valley. Yet for all its importance, Sarazm remains relatively little known outside specialist circles. Its stones do not rise dramatically above the landscape, and its story is written in fragments: tools, walls, traces of fire, and layers of earth. Each piece adds to the picture, but none completes it. As with so many ancient sites, Sarazm offers evidence of innovation without full explanation, of connection without complete maps, of organization without written rules. It stands as a reminder that early complexity did not belong to a single region or culture. And as researchers continue to uncover its layers, a quiet question lingers. How many other centers of early civilization remain hidden, waiting to challenge what we think we know about where and how human society truly began? From the open valleys of Sarazm, where early trade and proto-urban life quietly reshaped Central Asia, the path now turns south, toward the humid plains of eastern India. Here, in the modern state of Odisha, beneath layers of soil and centuries of growth, lies Sisupalgarh. Today, it sits on the edge of the city of Bhubaneswar, its ancient outlines partially absorbed by modern life. Yet beneath this living landscape is evidence of a carefully planned settlement whose earliest proto-phase challenges long-held assumptions about the origins of urbanism in the Indian subcontinent. At first, Sisupalgarh does not announce itself as an ancient city. There are no towering ruins, no monumental temples rising above the skyline. What remains visible are low earthen ramparts, stretches of embankment, and subtle changes in elevation that hint at something far older. But when viewed from above, a striking pattern emerges, a near-perfect quadrilateral enclosure, oriented with remarkable precision. This geometric clarity immediately sets Sisupalgarh apart from many early settlements, suggesting deliberate planning on a scale rarely associated with such an early period. Archaeological research indicates that the proto-phase of Sisupalgarh may date back to the early 1st millennium BCE, or possibly even earlier. Long before the site became associated with later historical kingdoms and urban development, this early phase already shows signs of organized space, defensive features, and coordinated construction. The walls, made of packed earth and later reinforced, outline a settlement that was clearly designed, not grown organically over time. Mainstream interpretations view Sisupalgarh as an early urban center, part of a broader pattern of emerging cities across South Asia. During this period, societies were becoming more complex, with increasing population density, trade, and political organization. In this framework, the proto-phase represents an experimental stage of urban planning, an early attempt to impose order, boundaries, and infrastructure on a growing community. Yet, the precision of Sisupalgarh's layout invites deeper curiosity. The enclosure is not only large, but unusually regular. The alignment of its walls suggests knowledge of geometry and spatial measurement that feels advanced for the time. This raises important questions. How were these measurements made? What tools or methods allowed builders to achieve such symmetry across such a wide area? And who held the authority or knowledge to design a city at this scale? Within the enclosure, excavations have revealed traces of habitation, craft production, and possibly administrative or elite areas. Pottery styles, small artifacts, and structural remains suggest a busy, organized community. Some areas appear more densely built than others, hinting at functional zoning, residential, industrial, or perhaps ceremonial. These patterns suggest not just a settlement, but a planned urban environment, where space reflected social and economic roles. One of the enduring mysteries of Sisupalgarh's proto-phase is the relative lack of monumental architecture compared to its scale and planning. Unlike later historic cities with large stone buildings or temples, early Sisupalgarh seems to have relied on earth, timber, and perishable materials. This makes much of its structure archaeologically invisible, leaving gaps in our understanding. It is possible that significant buildings once stood here, but have left only faint traces. What might have been lost to decay and time? The fortification itself adds another layer of intrigue. Defensive walls imply perceived threats, whether from rival groups, internal conflict, or symbolic displays of power. But was Sisupalgarh truly under constant threat, or did the walls serve additional purposes? Some scholars suggest that fortifications also defined social space, marking who belonged inside and who remained outside. In this sense, the walls may have been as much about identity and control as about military defense. The Proto-Phase also raises questions about political organization. A settlement of this size and complexity would likely have required leadership structures capable of mobilizing labor, managing resources, and enforcing decisions. Was Sisupalgarh governed by a local chief, a council, or an early form of state authority? The archaeological record offers only indirect clues, variations in housing, concentrations of goods, and the scale of public works. More speculative perspectives look beyond conventional explanations. Some have wondered whether Sisupalgarh reflects an even earlier tradition of urban planning in South Asia, one that has not been fully recognized because it does not fit neatly into later historical narratives. The site's geometry and scale have led to quiet comparisons with much older planned cities elsewhere, raising the possibility that knowledge of urban design may have deeper roots in the region than previously assumed. There is also the question of continuity. Sisupalgarh did not vanish after its proto-phase. It evolved, expanded, and became associated with later historical periods and political entities. This long lifespan makes it difficult to separate early features from later modifications. How much of what we see today truly belongs to the earliest phase, and how much reflects centuries of rebuilding and reinterpretation? The layers overlap, blurring the line between origin and transformation. Environmental context adds further complexity. The region's rivers, monsoon cycles, and fertile soils would have supported agriculture and population growth. At the same time, these same forces could bring flooding, erosion, and shifting landscapes. How did early planners account for these variables? Did environmental challenges shape the city's design in ways we can no longer clearly see? Some fringe theories suggest that Sisupalgarh's layout may have held symbolic or cosmological meaning, that its geometry reflected beliefs about order, direction, or sacred space. While such ideas are difficult to test archaeologically, they echo patterns seen in later South Asian architecture and city planning, where alignment and proportion carried cultural significance. If this symbolism existed in the proto-phase, it would suggest a continuity of conceptual planning that stretches back further than usually recognized. Walking the site today, it is easy to overlook its importance. Modern roads, buildings, and neighborhoods press close to the ancient earthworks. The city has grown around its own deep past, partially concealing it. Yet beneath the surface, Sisupalgarh continues to hold evidence of a moment when urban life in this region was taking early, uncertain form. The proto-phase of Sisupalgarh stands at a threshold, between village and city, between organic growth and deliberate design, between what is visible and what has vanished. Its walls and foundations hint at ambition, organization, and knowledge that are still not fully understood. And as archaeologists continue to peel back its layers, a quiet question remains. How many other early cities, shaped in earth and timber, have disappeared almost entirely, leaving behind only faint traces to suggest that complex urban life began earlier and in more places than we ever imagined? From the earth-built geometry of Sisupalgarh, where early planners shaped space with boundaries and order, our journey now shifts back in time and deeper into prehistory. The path leads to the arid highlands of southern Jordan, where rugged sandstone cliffs and dry valleys frame a landscape that appears almost untouched by time. Here, near the edge of the Petra region, lie the remains of Beidha, a Neolithic settlement whose stone platforms and architectural traces hint at some of the earliest experiments in permanent communal life. At first, Beidha seems easy to miss. There are no towering walls or dramatic ruins. Instead, low stone foundations and carefully arranged platforms emerge from the rocky ground, blending into the surrounding terrain. Yet these modest remains represent something extraordinary. Beidha dates to the pre-pottery Neolithic B period, around the 8th millennium BCE, a time when humanity was only beginning to transition from mobile hunter-gatherer lifestyles to settled agricultural communities. The setting itself feels deliberately chosen. Nestled within a sheltered basin, Beidha sits close to seasonal water sources and natural routes through the mountains. The location would have offered both protection and access. Protection from harsh winds and exposure, and access to hunting grounds, plant resources, and early farming areas. This balance between isolation and connectivity may have played a key role in why people chose to settle here. What makes Beidha particularly intriguing are its stone platforms and architectural layouts. Excavations have revealed a series of carefully constructed stone bases, some supporting circular or oval structures, others forming raised platforms whose full purpose remains uncertain. These were not random piles of rock. The stones were selected, shaped, and arranged with intention, creating level surfaces in an uneven landscape. For a community still close to its hunter-gatherer roots, this represents a significant investment of time and labor. Mainstream interpretations view these platforms as foundations for early houses or communal buildings. The circular structures associated with some platforms are thought to have supported superstructures made of mud brick, timber, and other perishable materials. Over thousands of years, these upper components vanished, leaving behind only the stone bones of the settlement. In this view, Beidha becomes a window into early domestic architecture, a place where people experimented with permanence, building homes meant to last longer than a single season. But not all platforms fit neatly into this explanation. Some appear larger or more carefully constructed than others, suggesting they may have served special functions. Were these communal gathering spaces, storage areas, places for shared rituals or decision-making? Without written records, the social meaning of these structures must be inferred from their size, placement, and relationship to surrounding features. Each interpretation opens new possibilities, but also new uncertainties. Beidha is also significant for what it reveals about early community organization. The layout suggests clusters of buildings arranged around shared spaces, implying a social structure based on cooperation and proximity. People here were not simply living side by side, they were shaping a shared environment. This required coordination, agreement, and a collective sense of place. The platforms, in this context, may represent more than architecture. They may represent early expressions of communal identity. The transition to settled life was not a simple or risk-free choice. Farming and permanent settlement brought new challenges: dependence on crops, vulnerability to drought, and the spread of disease in denser populations. The investment in stone platforms suggests confidence in staying put, but also raises questions about what motivated that confidence. What knowledge systems about seasons, plants, and water allowed these early communities to believe that settlement was sustainable? Some researchers point to Beidha as part of a wider network of early Neolithic sites in the Levant, where similar architectural features appear. In this broader context, Beidha becomes one node in a regional transformation, a shared experiment in new ways of living. Ideas about building, farming, and social organization may have spread between communities, creating a patchwork of innovation across the landscape. Yet even within this framework, Beidha stands out. The care invested in its stone platforms feels deliberate and forward-looking. It suggests planning beyond immediate needs, a willingness to shape the land itself to fit human intentions. This raises deeper questions about mindset. At what point did people begin to see the landscape not just as something to move through, but as something to permanently reshape? More speculative perspectives consider whether some platforms had symbolic or ceremonial significance. Their size, placement, and construction quality may indicate that certain spaces were set apart from everyday domestic life. Could these have been early ritual platforms, places where communal ceremonies, seasonal observances, or social negotiations took place? While there is no direct evidence to confirm this, the idea reflects a broader pattern seen in later Neolithic and Chalcolithic societies, where architecture often carried layered meanings beyond simple shelter. There is also the matter of labor and organization. Building stone platforms requires coordinated effort. Stones must be gathered, transported, and arranged. This implies leadership, shared goals, or at least strong social cohesion. How were these efforts organized? Was there a recognized authority, or were decisions made collectively? The archaeological record preserves the result, but not the conversations and negotiations that must have accompanied such work. Environmental change may also play a role in the story of Beidha. The early Holocene was a period of shifting climates, with changing rainfall patterns and evolving ecosystems. These changes may have created both opportunities and pressures that encouraged experimentation with settlement. Beidha's platforms could represent an adaptive response, a way to stabilize living spaces in a landscape that was itself in flux. Some fringe ideas go further, suggesting that early Neolithic communities like Beidha may have possessed lost traditions of planning and construction that we no longer fully recognize. While such theories remain speculative, they reflect a growing sense that early societies may have been more innovative and capable than once assumed. The platforms, simple as they appear, may represent a technological and social threshold, a quiet beginning of architectural traditions that would later grow into cities and monumental structures. What is most striking about Beidha is its subtlety. There is no single dramatic feature that explains everything. Instead, the mystery lies in accumulation. Stone upon stone, platform beside platform, each one a small decision that, together, marked a profound shift in human life. The site captures a moment when permanence was still new, when the idea of building for the future was still being tested. Today, as sunlight falls across the low stone outlines and desert winds move through the valley, Beidha feels both ancient and unfinished. Its platforms remain, but their full stories do not. They hint at gatherings, at shared labor, at early visions of community, yet they leave us without certainty. In the end, Beidha does not offer clear answers. It offers evidence of beginnings, of architecture, of settlement, of a new relationship between people and place. And in those beginnings, a question lingers quietly in the stones. How much of humanity's earliest built world has vanished completely, leaving only faint platforms and foundations to suggest that the roots of civilization were laid far earlier and in far subtler ways than we may ever fully understand? From the quiet stone platforms of Beidha, where early communities first tested the idea of shaping the land into permanent living space, the journey now continues east, into the broad plains and rugged foothills of what is now western Pakistan. Here, at the edge of the Bolan Pass in Balochistan, lies Mehrgarh, a vast Neolithic and Chalcolithic site whose stone architecture and layered remains trace one of the longest and most important early experiments in settled life in South Asia. The landscape around Mehrgarh is stark and expansive. Dry plains stretch toward distant hills, while seasonal rivers carve shallow channels through the earth. It is a place that demands adaptation. Water is limited, temperatures can be extreme, and yet for thousands of years people return to this site, building, rebuilding, and expanding their settlement. The low mounds that mark Mehrgarh today conceal a deep archaeological record, layer upon layer of human activity reaching back to around 7000 BCE. At first glance, Mehrgarh's stone architecture appears simple. Rectangular structures, stone foundations, and mud brick walls define a pattern of early housing and storage buildings. These were not monumental constructions meant to impress from a distance. They were practical, functional spaces designed for daily life. Yet their very simplicity reveals something extraordinary: consistency. Over centuries, similar building styles were repeated, refined, and expanded, suggesting shared traditions and long-term continuity. The earliest levels of Mehrgarh show some of the first evidence of farming in the region. Wheat and barley cultivation, along with the domestication of cattle, sheep, and goats, point to a community deeply engaged in agricultural life. Stone and mud brick buildings would have supported storage of grain, protection of livestock, and shelter for growing families. In mainstream interpretations, Mehrgarh is seen as a foundational site, one that helps explain how farming and village life spread into the Indus region. But Mehrgarh is not simply an agricultural village frozen in time. Its stone architecture reflects gradual complexity. Some buildings appear to have been larger or more carefully constructed, possibly serving as communal spaces, workshops, or storage facilities. The layout suggests planning beyond immediate needs. Streets or pathways can be inferred, and clusters of buildings imply neighborhoods or functional zones. This raises important questions about social organization. How were tasks divided? Who made decisions about building placement and expansion? One of the most intriguing aspects of Mehrgarh is its longevity. The site was occupied for thousands of years, evolving from early Neolithic settlement into more complex Chalcolithic communities. Over this long span, architectural styles changed, but the commitment to permanent structures remained. Stone foundations continued to anchor buildings, even as materials and techniques evolved. This persistence suggests that Mehrgarh was not an experiment that failed or was abandoned quickly. It was a successful, adaptable settlement that responded to changing conditions. Within and around these stone structures, archaeologists have found evidence of specialized activities: beadmaking, tool production, and early forms of craft specialization. Materials such as turquoise, shell, and lapis lazuli appear in the archaeological record, indicating long-distance connections. Like Sarazm, Mehrgarh seems to have been part of wider exchange networks. These connections raise questions about how ideas and technologies traveled. Were merchants moving between regions? Were craftspeople migrating? Or did knowledge spread through slower, indirect contact? Mainstream archaeology places Mehrgarh as a precursor to the later Indus Valley civilization. In this view, the architectural traditions, agricultural systems, and social organizations seen here laid the groundwork for the urban centers that would later rise at Harappa and Mohenjo-Daro. Mehrgarh becomes part of a long developmental story, a stepping stone toward one of the world's great ancient civilizations. Yet there are elements that resist simple narratives of linear progress. The stone architecture of Mehrgarh does not show a clear, steady march toward monumental building. Instead, it reflects adaptation and continuity. The focus remains on functional spaces rather than grand public architecture. This raises a deeper question: what does complexity really look like in early societies? Is it always marked by monuments, or can it be found in long-term stability, shared building traditions, and subtle social organization? Home researchers have noted that certain architectural features at Mehrgarh, such as storage facilities and standardized building layouts, suggest early forms of planning that go beyond individual households. These patterns hint at communal rules or shared expectations. Even without visible palaces or temples, there may have been systems of authority, tradition, and social regulation guiding how space was used. More speculative perspectives look at Mehrgarh as evidence that early South Asian societies developed complex systems independently, rather than simply inheriting them from the Near East. While there is evidence of contact and influence, Mehrgarh also shows local innovation. The combination of stone architecture, farming, and craft specialization may reflect a regional pathway to complexity, one that does not fit neatly into older models centered on Mesopotamia or Egypt. There is also the question of what has been lost. Much of Mehrgarh's architecture was built with perishable materials layered on stone foundations. Timber, reeds, and mud brick would have formed walls and roofs that have long since disappeared. What remains are outlines and bases, shadows of full structures. Entire social spaces, perhaps central halls or ritual areas, may have vanished almost without trace. This absence makes interpretation difficult. What roles did these buildings truly play in daily and ceremonial life? Environmental change again enters the story. Shifts in climate, river patterns, and resource availability would have shaped how Mehrgarh evolved. The ability of the community to persist suggests resilience and flexibility. Architecture may have been a key tool in that resilience, allowing people to store surplus, protect resources, and create stable living environments in a challenging setting. Some fringe ideas go further, suggesting that sites like Mehrgarh may preserve echoes of lost traditions of building and planning that are no longer fully visible. While such ideas remain speculative, they reflect a broader sense that early societies may have been more capable, more organized, and more interconnected than once believed. The stone architecture, humble as it appears, may represent the visible edge of deeper systems of knowledge and tradition. Walking through the low mounds of Mehrgarh today, it is difficult to feel the full weight of its history. The stones are quiet, the outlines are subtle. Yet beneath them lies one of the longest continuous records of early settled life in the region. Each foundation represents a decision to stay, to build, to invest in a future that could not yet be fully imagined. Mehrgarh does not confront us with towering ruins. It confronts us with persistence, with the slow accumulation of choices that, over millennia, shaped new ways of living. And in that persistence, a question remains suspended in the dust and stone. How many other early centers of innovation, built not in grand monuments but in modest foundations, have disappeared entirely, leaving behind only faint traces to suggest that the roots of civilization were far more widespread and far more complex than our surviving ruins can ever fully reveal? From the long layers of human settlement at Mehrgarh, where early farmers and builders quietly shaped permanence into the landscape, our journey now moves northward, toward the rocky uplands of the Balkans, where stone again becomes a marker not just of shelter, but of celestial observation. High on a hill near the town of Kumanovo, in what is now North Macedonia, sits Kokino, a Bronze Age observatory whose carved rock surfaces and natural outcrops whisper of a people looking upward, trying to measure, predict, and perhaps even understand the sky itself. The landscape around Kokino is stark and dramatic. Jagged cliffs and boulders rise from a gently sloping plateau, and from this vantage point, the surrounding valleys stretch toward distant mountains, the horizon clear and uninterrupted. The site's isolation is immediately striking. Far from rivers and fertile plains, it is not a place chosen for farming or settlement alone. Instead, the stones themselves seem to be the point. At Kokino, nature and human intervention merge. Boulders are carved with deliberate lines, flat surfaces positioned to catch the sun's first rays, depressions and sight lines aligned with the movements of the moon and the sun. Archaeological study dates the observatory to around 1900 BCE during the early Bronze Age. Mainstream interpretations describe Kokino as one of the oldest known megalithic observatories in Europe. Its function appears astronomical. The placement of carved stones and naturally aligned features could have been used to track the solar calendar, mark lunar phases, and indicate the changing seasons. For an agrarian society, such knowledge would have been vital, timing planting and harvesting, understanding weather patterns, and coordinating communal activity. Yet even as Kokino's practical applications are acknowledged, the precision of its design invites deeper questions. Some of the stone markers align with sunrise and sunset on solstices, while others correspond to lunar extremes. The integration of natural rock formations with human carving is unusually sophisticated. How did people achieve such accuracy without written instruments or formalized mathematics? How much trial and observation would have been required to position each stone in such a way that it could serve as a reliable celestial guide? The site itself is divided into distinct areas: terraces, flat platforms, and viewing points. Archaeologists suggest that some terraces may have been used for ceremonial or observational gatherings, while others were practical markers for calculations. The careful interplay between the natural contours of the hill and the human modifications demonstrates a nuanced understanding of both landscape and sky. This interplay is what sets Kokino apart from ordinary settlements or ritual sites. It is a landscape intentionally shaped to connect the terrestrial and the celestial. Some researchers speculate that Kokino may have served more than a functional purpose. Could it have been a space of ritual, where the observation of celestial phenomena was entwined with spiritual or religious meaning? Many ancient cultures attributed significance to the sun, moon, and stars, connecting cycles of light with life, death, and renewal. At Kokino, the precise alignments may have created moments of awe and insight, when the sun rose in exact alignment with a carved notch, or when shadows fell perfectly across a terrace, signaling time and season simultaneously. Mainstream interpretations focus on its utility, but the site's complexity suggests broader cultural significance. Constructing and maintaining such an observatory would have required coordination, observation skills, and continuity across generations. This implies social organization capable of long-term planning. Unlike transient settlements, Kokino required investment, time, labor, and accumulated knowledge. Who held the authority or knowledge to maintain such precision? Were there specialized observers or ritual leaders guiding its use? The stones provide evidence, but they do not tell us the full story. Adding to the mystery is Kokino's longevity and visibility. Positioned on a high plateau, the site could have been seen from miles around, making it both a landmark and a signal. Was it a central gathering point for neighboring communities? A shared calendar for an extended population? Or was it intended for a smaller, select group with specialized knowledge? Such questions remain open. Some fringe perspectives suggest that Kokino's design may encode information beyond the practical, a symbolic cosmology, or perhaps knowledge lost to history. The alignment of stones with celestial events may have been both instruction and ritual, both measurement and myth. Others have speculated whether the site could have been a teaching ground, where knowledge of the sky was passed down through generations. While these ideas cannot be proven, they speak to the depth of human curiosity that the site embodies. Modern observers are struck by the clarity of the horizon and the precision of sight lines, yet the Bronze Age builders had no telescopes, no written records, and no standardized instruments. How did they achieve such accuracy? How did generations of observers maintain these alignments over centuries, in a landscape subject to erosion, frost, and shifting soils? The answer remains elusive, preserved only in the stones themselves. Walking among the terraces today, the wind cuts across the plateau and the sun casts long shadows over the carved notches. The site is quiet, yet the lines of sight and platforms hint at a rhythm once followed, a system of observation that connected humans to the cycles of the sky. Each boulder, each carved depression represents not only labor, but intention, a deliberate attempt to map time and space through stone. Kokino does not confront us with written explanations. It presents alignment, geometry, and placement, leaving us to interpret the purpose and meaning. It is both functional and enigmatic. It demonstrates knowledge that seems almost impossible for a small Bronze Age community to achieve, and yet it is undeniably real. In the end, Kokino stands as a testament to humanity's earliest fascination with the cosmos, a place where observation, ritual, and architecture converge. It challenges assumptions about what Bronze Age societies could understand and construct. And as the sun sets across the high plateau, casting shadows along the ancient terraces, one question remains suspended in the stones. How much of humanity's early knowledge of the heavens has been lost, and how many other observatories, carefully aligned and long forgotten, await rediscovery in landscapes that have long remained silent? From the rocky plateau of Kokino, where Bronze Age observers once traced the sun and moon across the sky, our journey now descends thousands of kilometers southward into the arid highlands of central Mexico. Here, amidst scrubland, volcanic ridges, and rolling hills, lies La Quemada, a site whose layered stone architecture, broad terraces, and enigmatic pathways reveal a civilization whose purpose continues to elude scholars. Unlike the quiet, precise observatories of Kokino, La Quemada confronts the viewer with scale, complexity, and a sense of deliberate monumentalism that feels both familiar and utterly alien. Approaching La Quemada, the first impression is one of deliberate construction carved from the landscape itself. A long stone staircase ascends the hill, connecting wide terraces, residential compounds, and ceremonial enclosures. Massive walls, built of volcanic rock, rise along the plateau's edge, while narrow corridors snake between structures, creating both connection and restriction. From a distance, the site's layout appears organic, molded by the topography. Yet, closer inspection reveals careful planning. Terraces are level, walls are systematically built, and sight lines suggest deliberate orientation. Every stone seems placed with purpose. La Quemada flourished roughly between 300 and 1200 CE, though its origins may extend even earlier. Archaeological evidence points to a complex society, with indications of craft production, trade, and ritual activity. Artifacts such as ceramics, obsidian tools, and decorative items demonstrate connections with distant Mesoamerican cultures. Some elements hint at ties with the Teotihuacan and Purépecha regions, though the precise nature and extent of these connections remain a matter of debate. Mainstream interpretations identify La Quemada as a fortified urban center or hilltop citadel. The terraces may have served residential, administrative, or ceremonial functions. The walls, staircases, and narrow passageways suggest defense and control of movement, perhaps reflecting both social hierarchy and the need for protection. Scholars propose that the site's elevated location allowed inhabitants to monitor the surrounding valleys, regulate trade routes, or defend against intruders. Yet these explanations, while plausible, do not account for every anomaly. Certain features of La Quemada continue to confound archaeologists. For example, the site contains an unusual pyramid-like structure, sometimes referred to as the Great Pyramid of La Quemada, which does not match the standard forms of Mesoamerican pyramids. Its terraces are irregular, its construction methods are distinct, and the purpose of its flat summit remains debated. Was it a ceremonial platform, a defensive lookout, or something else entirely? Similarly, the network of narrow corridors and hidden stairways creates movement patterns that seem as much psychological as practical, forcing visitors to slow, turn, and navigate carefully. What was the intention behind such deliberate control of space? Evidence of fire and destruction adds another layer of intrigue. Excavations have uncovered burned layers and charred remains in some areas of the site. Did La Quemada suffer attack, accidental fire, or ritual burning? Some researchers suggest that these events marked social upheaval or ceremonial closure, while others see them as the results of conflict between rival groups. The lack of written records leaves the interpretation open, and the story of La Quemada's decline remains elusive. Beyond practical and defensive purposes, the site raises broader questions about social organization. Its scale and architectural complexity imply coordinated labor, leadership, and planning. Building terraces, walls, and stairways from volcanic rock required careful quarrying, transportation, and placement. Who orchestrated these efforts? Were these projects driven by elite rulers, communal decision-making, or religious authority? The stones preserve the evidence of effort, but not the motivations or negotiations behind it. More speculative perspectives explore the symbolic or astronomical dimensions of La Quemada. Some researchers note alignments with solar and lunar events, particularly along terraces and stairways. Could these features have served as markers for ritual observances, agricultural cycles, or cosmological events? While such interpretations remain debated, they suggest that La Quemada may have integrated practical, social, and symbolic considerations in ways that are still only partially understood. La Quemada's isolation also invites reflection. Unlike riverine cities or fertile valley settlements, it occupies a semi-arid highland environment. The choice of location implies deliberate prioritization. Visibility, defense, and control of movement may have outweighed ease of agriculture or access to abundant water. How did inhabitants adapt to these conditions? Did the environment shape social and architectural choices in ways we are only beginning to recognize? Even the site's spatial hierarchy is puzzling. Certain terraces and compounds appear more monumental, others more private or domestic. Movement between areas is mediated by stairways and corridors, suggesting controlled access. This hints at social stratification or ritualized behavior, yet the details remain mysterious. Were these spaces reserved for elites, religious specialists, or communal gatherings? And how did the population experience the site on a daily basis? Walking La Quemada today, it is impossible not to sense both achievement and mystery. The terraces extend across the hill, the staircases rise toward the summit, and the walls enclose spaces that once rang with activity, planning, and ritual. Stones that endured centuries now bear only the faintest traces of human interaction, yet their placement speaks of intention, labor, and foresight. La Quemada offers no easy answers. It presents a complex interplay of defense, habitation, ceremony, and possibly astronomical observation, yet none of these functions explains the site in its entirety. It is simultaneously familiar in its echoes of urban planning and monumental architecture, and alien in its irregular forms and enigmatic corridors. In the quiet highlands, as wind sweeps across terraces and stairways, La Quemada seems to resist full understanding. Its stones hint at effort, knowledge, and intention that are beyond replication today. And in that very ambiguity, a question lingers. What was the full purpose of this hilltop citadel, and how much of its knowledge, its ceremonies, and its social structure has been lost to time, leaving us only with the silent stone outlines of a civilization that shaped the land in ways we may never fully comprehend? From the high terraces and stairways of La Quemada, where stone guided both movement and perception, our journey now turns across continents to the arid valleys of the Levant. Here, perched on a hill overlooking the Elah Valley in modern-day Israel, lies Khirbet Qeiyafa, a fortified site whose stone core and massive walls offer a glimpse into an early organized society emerging amid the political and social turbulence of the Iron Age. Unlike the monumental citadel of La Quemada, Khirbet Qeiyafa impresses through its measured geometry, strategic positioning, and architectural precision, hinting at a civilization capable of planning, defense, and social coordination that is both remarkable and enigmatic. The landscape around Khirbet Qeiyafa is immediately commanding. The hilltop rises sharply above the surrounding valleys, offering sweeping views of the fertile lands below and distant ridges beyond. From this vantage point, movement through the region could be monitored, trade routes overseen, and potential threats anticipated. The hill is naturally defensible, yet the builders augmented its protection with massive stone walls and carefully placed gates. Even after millennia, the surviving ramparts convey the intention of authority, control, and permanence. Excavations have revealed a settlement whose core, the central, fortified area, was deliberately laid out. Rectangular and circular structures, stone foundations, and compact streets indicate careful planning rather than organic growth. The massive outer walls, built with large stones and carefully joined corners, demonstrate an advanced understanding of construction techniques. Gateways are narrow and angled, forcing visitors to slow and turn, suggesting deliberate control of access. For a settlement dated to roughly the late 11th or early 10th century BCE, these features are extraordinary. Mainstream interpretations describe Khirbet Qeiyafa as a frontier city, possibly a Judahite stronghold established during a time of political consolidation. Its walls and fortifications suggest defense against external threats, while its internal layout indicates organized habitation. Archaeologists have uncovered evidence of domestic life, storage facilities, and communal spaces, reflecting a community capable of sustaining both daily life and collective defense. The site's scale and design suggest coordination, labor organization, and perhaps central authority, a society not merely surviving, but planning for continuity. Yet Khirbet Qeiyafa resists straightforward explanation. The precision of its core is striking. Its walls form a near-perfect ellipse, with corners and angles carefully measured, and the internal arrangement suggests conscious attention to symmetry and proportion. How did its builders achieve such geometric accuracy without standardized measuring tools? What methods allowed them to design, quarry, transport, and place stones so precisely? Even today, replication of such work would require careful planning, skilled labor, and knowledge of material properties. The internal structures add to the mystery. Some buildings appear uniform, suggesting communal or administrative functions, while others vary in size and form, hinting at social differentiation or specialized use. Evidence of storage jars, hearths, and craft areas indicates that Khirbet Qeiyafa was more than a military outpost. It was a living, functioning community. Yet the lack of monumental religious or administrative buildings raises questions. Did this society operate without central temples or palaces? Or were such structures constructed with perishable materials, now lost to time? Beyond architecture, Khirbet Qeiyafa offers tantalizing glimpses into social and cultural life. Pottery, tools, and small artifacts reveal trade and craftsmanship, while inscriptions, including early Hebrew script on ostraka, suggest literacy and record-keeping. These discoveries hint at administrative sophistication, but also raise questions. Who wrote these messages, and what was their purpose? Were they legal records, ritual texts, or simple household notations? The core provides evidence, but its meaning is open to interpretation. Speculative perspectives have emerged in part because of the site's unusual combination of features: massive fortifications, precise geometry, and apparent social organization, yet minimal monumental religious architecture. Some scholars suggest that Khirbet Qeiyafa may have been deliberately experimental, a frontier city testing urban planning and defense in a politically contested region. Others propose symbolic interpretations, that the site's form, walls, and spatial hierarchies may have conveyed messages of power, identity, or territorial claim to neighboring populations. Environmental context further complicates the story. Situated on a dry hilltop with limited water sources, the settlement demonstrates strategic adaptation. Access to arable land and control of surrounding valleys would have been crucial, but sustaining a community in this location required foresight, planning, and resource management. How did its inhabitants balance defense, agriculture, and daily life? How did environmental pressures shape architecture, urban layout, and social organization? Some fringe interpretations consider Khirbet Qeiyafa as a precursor to more complex urban centers in the region. Its core, with geometric precision and fortifications, may reflect knowledge of city planning that emerged elsewhere, or parallel innovations responding to local needs. Whether it served primarily military, administrative, or symbolic purposes, the settlement embodies a level of coordination and sophistication that feels unusually advanced for its time, raising questions about technological and organizational capacities in early Iron Age societies. Today, standing among the remains of its massive walls, the contours of terraces, and the carefully laid foundations, one can sense the deliberate intent embedded in stone. The core of Khirbet Qeiyafa does not speak in words, but its geometry, alignment, and construction choices echo across centuries, inviting reflection on the people who once walked its streets, observed its boundaries, and coordinated its labor. Khirbet Qeiyafa challenges assumptions about what early frontier societies could achieve. Its massive walls, geometric precision, and complex internal layout suggest knowledge and capability that would be difficult to replicate even today. And yet, its ultimate purpose, its social dynamics, and the reasons for its eventual decline remain uncertain. In this silence, the site poses a question that endures across time. How much of early urban innovation, societal coordination, and architectural skill has been lost to history, leaving only stone foundations to hint at the ingenuity of those who came before us? From the fortified hilltop of Khirbet Qeiyafa, where stone walls and geometric precision speak of Iron Age strategy and social organization, our journey now shifts northwest, across seas, mountains, and centuries, into the misted landscapes of the Scottish Highlands. Here, near the banks of the River Nairn, lie the enigmatic Balnuaran of Clava cairns, a cluster of Bronze Age burial monuments whose standing stones, circular arrangements, and subterranean chambers evoke a world of ritual, celestial observation, and architectural mastery that continues to perplex modern researchers. The landscape around Balnuaran of Clava is both tranquil and dramatic. Rolling hills give way to forested slopes, and in the distance the Scottish Highlands rise with a quiet majesty. The cairns themselves sit on a gentle rise, commanding views of the surrounding valleys. From this vantage point, one can imagine the original builders watching the movement of the sun across the sky, the seasonal changes in the landscape, and the comings and goings of people, animals, and weather across the land. In such a setting, the monuments are simultaneously markers of the human presence and harmoniously embedded in the natural environment. At first glance, the cairns appear simple: circular stone structures, low mounds, and scattered standing stones. But closer examination reveals extraordinary sophistication. The Balnuaran of Clava complex comprises multiple cairns arranged in precise patterns, many encircled by ringed curbs of carefully selected stone. Some feature passageways leading into subterranean chambers, others contain central cists, carefully aligned with the rising or setting sun at specific times of the year. The stones themselves are meticulously shaped and positioned, suggesting not only technical skill but a profound understanding of geometry and spatial relationships. Radiocarbon dating places the construction of these cairns around 4,000 years ago, during the Bronze Age. Mainstream interpretations identify them as burial monuments associated with the local community's funerary practices. Human remains, along with grave goods such as pottery, stone tools, and beads, suggest that these were not simple graves, but sites of ritual importance, perhaps intended to honor, memorialize, and connect the living with the dead. Yet even within this practical explanation, the precision and scale of the work hint at a deeper purpose, one that may intertwine cosmology, community identity, and ritual performance. One of the most remarkable features of Balnuaran of Clava is its alignment with celestial events. Several of the cairns are positioned so that sunlight illuminates specific points of the chambers during the winter solstice. Some researchers suggest that the orientation of curbstones and passages allowed the builders to mark the progression of the sun and, potentially, to track seasonal cycles critical for agricultural or ritual purposes. How the builders achieved such accuracy without written records or formal surveying tools remains a puzzle. Could these alignments represent careful observation over generations, passed down through oral knowledge and practical experience? Or is there a layer of symbolic meaning intertwined with the astronomical? The construction techniques themselves are extraordinary. Stones weighing hundreds of kilograms were quarried, transported, and set into place with remarkable precision, often forming concentric rings or perfectly circular enclosures. The effort required suggests organized labor, leadership, and social cohesion, an ability to mobilize communities for collective tasks that would have demanded significant coordination. How were these projects planned and executed? Who directed the placement of stones, and by what criteria? The architecture communicates intention, yet it leaves no record of the decision-making processes behind it. The cairns also exhibit subtle variation. Some are larger, more elaborately constructed, with multiple ringed curbs and stone avenues leading to ceremonial spaces. Others are smaller, simpler, yet carefully proportioned. This hierarchy suggests differentiation, perhaps reflecting status, function, or phases of construction. Yet the absence of inscriptions or direct evidence of ritual performance forces us to interpret intention from form alone. Were these spaces for elites, or did they serve broader community functions? Did variation in size reflect chronological development, social hierarchy, or spiritual significance? Balnuaran of Clava is also part of a wider network of contemporary cairns and stone circles across Scotland and northern Britain, hinting at shared cultural and architectural traditions. Similarities in design, orientation, and construction techniques suggest that these communities were not isolated, but part of a broader exchange of ideas, methods, and ritual practices. Yet each site retains its unique character. Subtle differences in stone choice, layout, and alignment raise questions about localized knowledge and cultural variation. How much of this reflects shared tradition, and how much represents individual innovation? Speculative perspectives further expand the intrigue. Some researchers have proposed that the cairns served as more than burial sites. They may have functioned as ceremonial observatories, sites of initiation, or focal points for communal gatherings. The interplay of light, shadow, and alignment could have been experienced in ways that went beyond practical timekeeping, creating moments of ritualized awe that connected participants to cycles of nature, life, and death. If so, these structures represent not only technical skill, but profound conceptual understanding. Environmental context also adds layers of meaning. Situated on a slight rise overlooking valleys, the cairns occupy a liminal space between river and hill, human settlement and wilderness, the living and the dead. The choice of location may have been symbolic, practical, or both. How did the surrounding landscape influence the siting of cairns, the arrangement of stones, and the experience of movement through the complex? Were views of the sunrise, distant hills or specific natural landmarks integral to the meaning of the monuments. Despite centuries of study, Balnuaran of Clava continues to resist full understanding. Modern technology, from LiDAR mapping to 3D reconstruction, reveals the precision and subtlety of the constructions, yet cannot fully reconstruct the cultural and spiritual significance imbued in the stones. The cairns evoke questions of knowledge transmission, ritual practice, and architectural innovation. How did communities of the Bronze Age achieve such complexity? How did they coordinate labor, sustain tradition, and encode meaning in stone? Walking among the standing stones and curbed cairns today, one is struck by the sense of deliberate design and enduring intention. The stones endure, weathered by millennia, yet they communicate a mastery of geometry, astronomy, and material handling that would challenge even modern builders. Their quiet majesty contrasts with their profound mystery. They are at once grounded in the earth and oriented toward the sky, linking human presence to cosmic cycles. Balnuaran of Clava does not offer straightforward explanations. It does not provide written records, detailed blueprints, or surviving oral accounts. Instead, it presents alignment, proportion, and construction choices that invite interpretation and speculation. Its builders left behind a physical record that conveys purpose and precision, yet conceals method, intent, and meaning. In the end, the Balnuaran of Clava cairns stand as enduring monuments to human ingenuity and curiosity. They demonstrate skill in design, organization, and celestial awareness, and yet they preserve their mystery. How were these alignments conceived and executed? What rituals took place within and around the stones? And most provocatively, how much knowledge of astronomy, geometry, and social coordination was achieved here in ways that remain impossible to fully replicate today? The cairns endure as silent witnesses to a civilization whose mastery challenges modern understanding, leaving us to wonder what else may still lie hidden beneath the mists of time and memory. From the misted hills and sacred stones of Balnuaran of Clava, where Bronze Age builders aligned cairns with sun and shadow, our journey now crosses the Atlantic and descends into the lush highlands of southwestern Guatemala. Here, nestled among the volcanic slopes and river valleys of the Pacific watershed, lies Takalik Abaj, a sprawling archaeological complex whose terraces, stone sculptures, and carefully aligned platforms reveal a civilization navigating the crossroads of Mesoamerican innovation. Unlike the solitary cairns of Scotland, Takalik Abaj pulses with evidence of layered occupation, monumental planning, and a fusion of artistic and architectural mastery that challenges easy explanation. The terrain of Takalik Abaj is both commanding and intimate. Rolling volcanic hills sweep into fertile valleys, while the nearby Rio Naranjo threads through the landscape, providing water, transportation, and sustenance. The site itself occupies a series of terraces carved into the slopes, each one meticulously leveled and reinforced with stone retaining walls. From the terraces, the eye travels across the complex. Platforms rise above platforms, plazas open onto stairways, and sculpted stone monuments punctuate the spatial rhythm. The arrangement feels deliberate, orchestrated to create not just function but presence, an enduring expression of human intention. Excavations reveal that Takalik Abaj was occupied for over 2 millennia, from the Middle Preclassic to the Early Classic periods, roughly 800 BCE to 200 CE. Its long lifespan attests to adaptability, continuity, and the sustained investment of labor and knowledge. Unlike simple village settlements, the site exhibits clear evidence of urban planning. Terraces aligned with cardinal directions, stairways linking ceremonial and residential areas, and platforms of varying sizes suggesting differentiated functions. Even in its earliest phases, Takalik Abaj demonstrates an understanding of landscape management, material engineering, and spatial hierarchy that is remarkable for its time. Mainstream interpretations view Takalik Abaj as a hybrid site, blending Olmec and early Maya cultural influences. The monumental sculptures, many carved from basalt, display both Olmec stylistic motifs and local innovation. Faces, jaguars, and abstract symbols punctuate plazas, while some stelae appear to mark ceremonial or calendrical events. The terraces themselves may have facilitated ritual processions, elite residences, or agricultural support. Yet, even within these frameworks, the complexity of construction and the integration of sculpture, architecture, and landscape hint at motivations that extend beyond practicality. One of the most intriguing aspects of Takalik Abaj is the terraces themselves. Each terrace is level, stable, and precisely oriented, suggesting careful engineering. Massive stones were quarried, transported, and positioned to create flat surfaces on otherwise uneven terrain. The effort required implies organized labor, leadership, and sustained communal coordination. How did these early builders plan such complex modifications to the land? What tools, knowledge, and techniques allowed them to manipulate volcanic soil, heavy stones, and steep gradients with such consistency? Even today, replicating these terraces would be a formidable challenge without modern machinery. The interplay between terraces, stairways, and platforms suggests more than practical adaptation. It implies symbolic intent. Certain terraces align with solar phenomena, hinting at an understanding of celestial cycles and their integration into daily and ritual life. Other terraces form concentric arrangements or axis-aligned sequences that guide movement through the site, perhaps reflecting social or ritual hierarchies. Were the terraces designed solely for function, or did they also encode cultural knowledge, cosmology, or power structures? The evidence points to both, yet leaves interpretation tantalizingly open. Stone monuments scattered across the terraces deepen the mystery. Some depict Olmec-style faces and jaguars. Others feature abstract motifs whose meaning is obscure. These sculptures are not randomly placed. They punctuate spaces, often oriented toward plazas, stairways, or horizon lines. Some researchers suggest they marked ritual or ceremonial points, while others speculate they encoded historical or cosmological knowledge. Yet the carvings do not come with inscriptions or accompanying records that explain their purpose. Were they meant to instruct, intimidate, commemorate, or consecrate? Perhaps all of these simultaneously. Takalik Abaj's construction techniques reveal advanced understanding of materials and load distribution. Retaining walls, stepped platforms, and carefully compacted soils ensured stability across centuries. Stone blocks were carved, fitted, and placed with a precision that resists easy replication. Some terraces show evidence of drainage planning, designed to channel rainwater without compromising structural integrity. This engineering sophistication implies knowledge accumulated over generations, a continuity of observation, experimentation, and adaptation rarely preserved in archaeological sites of this era. The site's hybrid character further deepens its enigmatic nature. Olmec influence suggests long-distance cultural transmission, yet local adaptation and innovation indicate a society capable of independent architectural and artistic decisions. How did ideas travel between regions? Did artisans migrate, or did symbolic motifs diffuse through trade and ceremonial exchange? And to what extent did the terraces themselves reflect imported knowledge versus local invention? The answer remains elusive. Speculative perspectives extend the intrigue. Some propose that terraces and platforms were designed to shape not only the physical experience of space, but also social and ritual perception. Ascending terraces could have guided participants through a sequence of spaces, each stage marking increasing ritual or social significance. Views across valleys and toward horizon points may have connected participants to natural phenomena, reinforcing cosmological symbolism. Could the terraces themselves have been a performative architecture, shaping movement, sight lines, and experience in ways that are difficult for us to reconstruct today? Environmental context provides further questions. The volcanic slopes of the region presented both opportunities and challenges. Fertile soils for cultivation, but unstable terrain prone to erosion. Managing these conditions required careful observation, long-term planning, and engineering acumen. How much of Takalik Abaj's terrace construction reflects adaptation to environmental pressures versus symbolic or ritual imperatives? The answer likely lies in a delicate balance of both. Even the human scale of the terraces invites reflection. Moving through the site, one senses deliberate gradation. Lower terraces may have accommodated communal or agricultural functions, while upper terraces provided ceremonial prominence. Stairways and retaining walls control movement, emphasizing ascent and approach. This suggests a conscious shaping of physical experience, where spatial arrangement reflects social hierarchy, ritual process, or cosmological alignment. How intentional were these effects, and how were they perceived by the community that inhabited the site? Walking among the terraces today, the sheer labor invested becomes palpable. Stones quarried and carried, earth compacted and leveled, platforms aligned with precision. These are achievements that seem almost impossible to replicate without collective organization and technical knowledge. And yet, centuries later, much of the cultural significance remains beyond reach. The terraces endure, but their full stories, the ceremonies, observations, and social interactions have faded. Takalik Abaj challenges assumptions about what early Mesoamerican societies could achieve. It demonstrates engineering skill, spatial organization, and cultural synthesis that defy simple replication. Yet, it does not reveal its full purpose. Were the terraces designed to honor ancestors, track the heavens, display social hierarchy, or all of these at once? How did the combination of art, architecture, and landscape shape perception, behavior, and ritual experience? In the quiet slopes of southwestern Guatemala, as sunlight plays across the stone platforms and volcanic terraces, Takalik Abaj stands as a testament to human ingenuity, observation, and cultural expression. Its terraces, monuments, and carefully shaped landscapes invite us to consider not only what was built, but how it was imagined and achieved. And in that invitation, a question lingers. How much knowledge, coordination, and understanding went into these terraces that remains inaccessible to us today? And what other mysteries of early Mesoamerican mastery await discovery, hidden in the folds of the mountains and the layers of earth beneath our feet? From the carefully terraced slopes and monumental platforms of Takalik Abaj, where early Mesoamerican societies transformed volcanic hills into living ceremonial landscapes, our journey now moves eastward into the lowlands of southern Mexico, to a site whose scale and sophistication challenge everything we thought we knew about early complex societies in the Americas. Here lies Aguada Fénix, a vast expanse of raised platforms and leveled causeways stretching across the lush tropical floodplains of Tabasco. A monumental construction that, despite its enormous size, remained hidden beneath the jungle until the advent of modern LiDAR mapping revealed its astonishing scope. The setting of Aguada Fénix is immediate and arresting. From the floodplain, subtle rises and depressions in the landscape hint at something extraordinary beneath the dense vegetation. Once cleared, the site reveals a network of platforms and causeways, rectangular, elongated, and carefully leveled, rising gently above the surrounding land. The platforms extend for kilometers, their surfaces flat and unbroken, their edges precisely defined. Some measure hundreds of meters in length and tens of meters in height, yet they were constructed with simple earth and stone, painstakingly moved and compacted without the benefit of modern machinery. Standing on one of these broad surfaces, it is difficult not to feel the weight of the labor, planning, and vision required to create such a space. Radiocarbon dating places the construction of Aguada Fénix around 1000 BCE, during what archaeologists now describe as the early formative period in Mesoamerica. At this time, societies in the region were transitioning from scattered villages to more complex social structures, yet they were not yet urbanized. The platforms challenge assumptions about technological and organizational capabilities in this period. They suggest coordinated labor on a massive scale, long-term planning, and perhaps even shared governance structures capable of sustaining projects of unprecedented size. Mainstream interpretations generally describe Aguada Fénix as a ceremonial center, a place for gatherings, rituals, and possibly the reinforcement of social cohesion among dispersed communities. Its elevated platforms could have served as stages for public events or as symbolic foundations linking the human and spiritual worlds. But the scale of the site, combined with the absence of monumental architecture or elite residences, raises compelling questions. Who built these platforms, and why did they invest so much labor into constructions that appear devoid of personal luxury or permanent habitation? The causeways that connect the platforms add to the mystery. Some stretch for more than a kilometer, straight and unbroken, connecting platforms in a network that is both geometric and purposeful. These causeways suggest deliberate control of movement across the floodplain, guiding visitors from one platform to another in ways that may have been ceremonial, symbolic, or practical. How did the builders determine their precise layout? What knowledge of surveying, measurement, and spatial organization guided the creation of these long, level paths? Excavations at Aguada Fénix also reveal evidence of intentional earth modification. Layers of clay, sand, and gravel were compacted to produce level surfaces, while earthen mounds were reinforced to create uniformity across uneven terrain. Such work would have required sustained coordination, observation, and trial and error experimentation. How was this knowledge transmitted across generations? Did communities develop a shared understanding of compaction, leveling, and long-term structural stability? Or was their specialized knowledge concentrated in a small group of planners and laborers? The size and simplicity of the platforms further deepen the enigma. Unlike later Maya or Olmec centers, there is a conspicuous lack of carved stone monuments, temples, or elite residences atop the platforms. The structures communicate scale and organization, but not hierarchy in the traditional sense. Some researchers propose that this may reflect a form of collective ceremonialism, where power was distributed or shared rather than centralized. Others speculate that the site may have served as a communal meeting place for large populations, a physical manifestation of social cohesion. Aguada Fénix's monumental scale is perhaps its most confounding feature. Measuring over a kilometer in length and hundreds of meters across, the platforms contain hundreds of thousands of cubic meters of compacted earth. Achieving this without wheeled vehicles, draft animals, or metal tools would have required thousands of human hours. Did the society rely on rotational labor contributions, long-term planning, or ritualized mobilization of the community? And how did they maintain the precision of the leveling over such vast expanses? The answers remain elusive. Speculative perspectives suggest that the site's design may have encoded more than social or ceremonial function. Could the arrangement of platforms and causeways correspond to solar or celestial events, seasonal cycles, or other cosmological knowledge? While definitive evidence of astronomical alignment is limited, the geometric regularity invites the possibility that the builders understood spatial relationships and long-term temporal patterns in ways that we have yet to fully decode. If so, Aguada Fénix represents an early expression of knowledge, blending engineering, social coordination, and perhaps cosmology on a scale that is extraordinary for its era. Environmental context is equally significant. The floodplain of Tabasco is fertile but seasonally challenging, with rivers prone to overflow and soft soils that require stabilization. The builders of Aguada Fénix had to manage these conditions, reinforcing surfaces, planning drainage, and ensuring long-term durability of their earthworks. The successful creation of level, enduring platforms across such terrain underscores both practical ingenuity and an intimate understanding of the landscape. Even after millennia, the platforms retain an almost hypnotic visual rhythm. Their broad, flat expanses create a sense of order imposed on the natural world, yet one that harmonizes with the surrounding floodplain and waterways. Walking across a single platform today, one can sense the effort, observation, and repeated human action that shaped the land. Each step seems to echo the work of countless hands, carrying, leveling, and compacting the earth with precision that modern replication would struggle to achieve without machinery. Aguada Fénix challenges conventional definitions of monumental architecture. It is neither a palace, temple, nor urban center in the conventional sense. Yet its scale, regularity, and precision suggest deliberate planning and extraordinary coordination. The site seems to ask, what constitutes complexity in human societies? Must it be expressed through stone temples and elite residences, or can it emerge in the sheer magnitude of leveled earth, collective effort, and spatial organization? As we stand metaphorically on its broad surfaces, contemplating the effort and vision required to build such platforms, a profound question arises. How did early formative communities conceptualize such massive undertakings? How did they organize labor, transmit knowledge, and sustain motivation for projects whose scale dwarfed daily life? And perhaps most provocatively, what other monumental constructions, lost to forest and time, might yet await discovery, hiding knowledge of human skill and ingenuity that modern eyes struggle to comprehend? Aguada Fénix does not reveal its secrets easily. Its earthwork platforms endure, silent witnesses to a society capable of planning, coordination, and monumental labor, yet enigmatic in their purpose and design. They speak not in inscriptions or detailed records, but through scale, geometry, and the deliberate shaping of the landscape. And in that silent testimony, they invite us to wonder, how many feats of early human engineering and social organization remain hidden beneath the earth, waiting for discovery, beyond the reach of replication and beyond the full comprehension of modern imagination? From the vast leveled platforms of Aguada Fénix, where early Mesoamerican societies shaped the floodplain into monumental expressions of labor and collective vision, our journey now crosses continents once again, moving northward to the Carpathian Mountains of present-day Romania. Here, perched high on the Orashtia Mountains, lie the enigmatic ruins of Sarmizegetusa Regia, the former capital of the Dacian kingdom. This site, with its concentric terraces, stone sanctuaries, and precise astronomical alignments, offers a glimpse into a society that fused defense, ritual, and spatial mastery in ways that continue to challenge our understanding. Approaching Sarmizegetusa Regia, the first impression is one of deliberate placement within the landscape. The ruins crown a plateau overlooking steep slopes and dense forest, offering commanding views of the surrounding valleys. Natural defenses are complemented by man-made fortifications. Massive stone walls curve around terraces, their blocks fitted with precision that resists simple replication. From this vantage point, one senses that visibility, control, and intentionality were paramount to the Dacian builders. Every stone seems chosen for both utility and symbolic presence, creating an environment that is as much psychological as it is architectural. The site comprises multiple layers of construction. Terraces rise in concentric sequences, linked by stairways and aligned pathways. Within these terraces lie sanctuaries, circular stone platforms, and pillars whose positioning appears deliberately calibrated. Archaeologists have documented the use of limestone and sandstone, carved and assembled to create structures both durable and visually striking. Some of the circular sanctuaries are thought to have functioned as solar observatories, with alignments marking solstices and equinoxes. How did the Dacians achieve such precision? What knowledge of geometry, astronomy, and material engineering informed the layout of this mountain citadel? Dating places the primary occupation of Sarmizegetusa Regia between the 1st century BCE and the 1st century CE, during the height of the Dacian kingdom under leaders like Burebista and Decebalus. Historical accounts suggest that the site served not only as a political and military capital, but also as a religious and ceremonial center. Excavations have revealed evidence of large-scale fortifications, domestic quarters, and spaces likely used for ritual gatherings. The integration of sacred and civic functions indicates a society capable of complex planning and sophisticated social organization. Yet even with these explanations, the site defies simple categorization. The concentric terraces are unusually precise, their measurements and orientation suggesting intentional alignment with both topographical and astronomical features. Some researchers propose that the stone sanctuaries were designed to function as observatories, capable of marking solar and lunar cycles. Others note the potential for symbolic or ritual significance, in which the arrangement of terraces, stairways, and pillars encoded cultural narratives, spiritual cosmology, or social hierarchy. Could the design have served simultaneously as defensive infrastructure, religious instruction, and celestial calendar? The fortifications themselves are extraordinary. Massive stone walls, often several meters thick, incorporate terraces and bastions that follow the natural contours of the mountains. Stones are carefully fitted, with corners and joints aligned to resist both erosion and attack. The sheer labor required to quarry, transport, and assemble these blocks in such a remote, elevated location is staggering. How did the Dacians coordinate such efforts without large-scale mechanization? What organizational methods allowed them to mobilize labor across difficult terrain? And how was knowledge of construction techniques transmitted across generations? Within the fortified terraces lie circular sanctuaries composed of carefully arranged stone pillars. Some are positioned to frame the rising or setting sun at key points in the solar year. Others align with distant peaks or valleys, suggesting the integration of topography into ritual or observational practices. These alignments hint at astronomical understanding, yet there is no written record explaining how measurements were conducted or what calendrical system may have been in use. How did the Dacians conceptualize these celestial relationships, and what role did they play in social, religious, or political life? Sarmizegetusa Regia also preserves evidence of metallurgical activity, craft production, and domestic settlement. Artifacts such as iron tools, ceramics, and ornaments reveal a society engaged in skilled labor and trade. Yet the scale and precision of the monumental architecture suggest a level of coordination that goes beyond ordinary civic planning. Who directed these massive projects, and how were resources and labor organized? Was there a class of specialized architects, engineers, or ritual leaders, and how was their knowledge maintained and applied? Speculative interpretations have emerged, given the site's combination of military, ceremonial, and astronomical elements. Some researchers suggest that the terraces and sanctuaries encoded not just practical knowledge, but also cosmological symbolism, a physical manifestation of the Dacian worldview, linking earth and sky, human society, and divine order. Others propose that the elevated position and visual prominence of Sarmizegetusa Regia served to reinforce political authority and social cohesion through spatial and psychological influence. Were these terraces a stage upon which both ritual and governance were performed, blending observation, ceremony, and statecraft? The environmental context of the site underscores the complexity of its construction. Situated at over 1,200 meters above sea level, Sarmizegetusa Regia faces steep gradients, variable weather, and logistical challenges for transporting materials. Builders had to not only quarry and shape stone, but also ensure that terraces remained stable over time. The combination of natural landscape and human intervention demonstrates sophisticated understanding of engineering principles and environmental adaptation. How did the Dacians manage such risks while maintaining the precision of their terraces and sanctuaries? Walking among the remnants of Sarmizegetusa Regia today, one senses the layered intentionality in every stone. Terraces rise in concentric clarity, stairways guide movement across levels, and sanctuaries punctuate the landscape with precision that seems almost impossible to replicate. Each element communicates purpose, yet the reasoning behind specific choices, the combination of ritual, astronomical, and defensive design, remains partly obscured. Sarmizegetusa Regia challenges assumptions about the capabilities of ancient societies in mountainous regions. It demonstrates remarkable skill in surveying, construction, spatial organization, and potentially astronomical observation, achieved without the benefits of modern tools or techniques. And yet, the full story remains elusive. How were these terraces planned and executed? What rituals unfolded on the sanctuary's elevated platforms? How did the alignment of stone and mountain shape both perception and social order? The ruins endure as silent witnesses to Dacian ingenuity, ambition, and cosmological understanding. They speak of labor meticulously coordinated, knowledge carefully applied, and vision grand enough to shape both the earth and the sky. And in their quiet persistence, Sarmizegetusa Regia leaves us with a question that reverberates across the centuries. What secrets of engineering, astronomy, and social organization lie encoded in these terraces, and how much of this ancient knowledge remains inaccessible, impossible to replicate, and waiting to be rediscovered beneath the stones of a vanished civilization? From the high terraces and sanctuaries of Sarmizegetusa Regia, where Dacian builders carved their knowledge of defense, astronomy, and ritual into the stone of the Carpathians, our exploration now turns westward into the gentle rolling plains of southwestern France. Here, in the region of Nouvelle-Aquitaine, lies the Tumulus of Bougon, a cluster of Neolithic burial mounds that rises subtly from the landscape, yet contains secrets that have captivated archaeologists for centuries. Unlike the mountain fortresses and monumental platforms we've explored, Bougon speaks softly, its low mounds and stone chambers concealing complex architecture beneath modest earthworks. The site presents a serene first impression. From a distance, the mounds appear as gentle rises on pasture land, almost unremarkable against the undulating fields. Yet, as one approaches, the careful geometry of the earthen forms becomes apparent. Circular enclosures, aligned chambers, and corridors cut into the mounds hint at deliberate design. These are not natural features. They are the product of human ingenuity applied over thousands of years, shaping earth and stone into enduring forms of ritual and remembrance. Bougon's history stretches back to roughly 4,700 BCE, placing it among the earliest known monumental constructions in Western Europe. Its age alone is impressive, but the sophistication of its architecture elevates it further into the realm of mystery. The site comprises 5 primary mounds, each with a unique internal arrangement. Some contain long stone chambers accessed through narrow passages, while others include circular or segmented compartments. Excavations reveal that these chambers were used for multiple burials over generations, suggesting a complex relationship with ancestry, ritual, and memory. Mainstream interpretations describe the Tumulus of Bougon as funerary in purpose. Human remains, pottery, flint tools, and animal bones indicate repeated use, ritual deposition, and ceremonial practice. Yet the design and construction of the mounds challenge conventional expectations for Neolithic communities. How did small, scattered agrarian societies achieve the precision and organization required to quarry and transport large stone blocks, assemble multi-chambered tombs, and level mounds across varying terrain? The labor investment implies coordination, knowledge of structural stability, and long-term planning, far beyond what is evident from domestic settlements of the same period. One of the most striking features of Bougon is the stone chambers themselves. Large, carefully fitted blocks form walls and ceilings capable of supporting the weight of the earthen mounds above. In some cases, lintels and corbelled structures demonstrate an understanding of load distribution and construction techniques that seem almost impossible to replicate with only basic Neolithic tools. How did the builders achieve such structural precision? Was this knowledge learned through experimentation, passed down through generations, or encoded in ritual practice that guided construction? The layout of the mounds raises additional questions. Some are aligned along cardinal directions, while others relate to distant landscape features or possibly astronomical phenomena. Could the orientation of the chambers and mounds reflect solstices, lunar cycles, or other celestial events? If so, the builders were combining architectural skill with observational astronomy, creating monuments that were simultaneously functional, symbolic, and cosmologically informed. Yet without written records, the exact purpose of these alignments remains speculative. Artifacts discovered within the chambers suggest layers of cultural practice. Flint axes, polished stone tools, pottery vessels, and occasional ornamental objects indicate a society that valued craftsmanship and ritualized deposition. Repeated use of the chambers over centuries hints at a long-term cultural memory, a reverence for the ancestors, and perhaps a codified system of ceremonial practice. What social or spiritual mechanisms allowed small Neolithic communities to maintain continuity in such complex constructions over generations? How did they transmit knowledge of construction techniques, ritual practice, and celestial observation without formalized education or written records? The Tumulus of Bougon also invites reflection on labor organization. Constructing multi-chambered stone mounds requires careful quarrying, transportation, precise placement, and compaction of earth, a scale of work that would challenge modern amateurs. Did communities work seasonally, coordinated through ritual or leadership? Or did smaller groups accumulate knowledge over time to contribute to these monumental projects? And to what degree were these mounds social projects intended to unify communities through collective labor, ceremony, and reverence? Speculative perspectives add another layer to Bougon's intrigue. Some archaeologists propose that the alignment of mounds and passages may encode astronomical knowledge or cosmological beliefs, allowing the living to connect with the cycles of the sun, moon, and stars. Others suggest that the repeated ritualized deposition of human remains may reflect a complex understanding of ancestry, time, and continuity, effectively creating a three-dimensional narrative of community memory within the architecture itself. Could these mounds have functioned simultaneously as tombs, observatories, and symbolic representations of social structure? Environmental context also deepens the mystery. The mounds were built on fertile plains suitable for agriculture, yet vulnerable to flooding and erosion. Builders would have needed to manage soil stability, drainage, and mound integrity over centuries. The interplay between natural landscape and human construction reflects both practical ingenuity and symbolic intent. How did these early communities negotiate the challenges of terrain, climate, and resources while maintaining the precision and permanence of their constructions? Walking among the mounds today, one is struck by their understated power. The earthen forms rise only modestly above the fields, yet their carefully shaped contours, aligned chambers, and internal complexity speak of deliberate planning, ritual sophistication, and human effort on a scale difficult to fully comprehend. Stones endure, but the knowledge, beliefs, and social coordination that produced them have largely vanished. The Tumulus of Bougon challenges assumptions about the capabilities of Neolithic societies. It demonstrates precision, structural understanding, and social organization that would be difficult to replicate even in contemporary terms. Yet it offers no easy explanations. Why were these mounds built with such care and labor? How did small, dispersed communities achieve this level of architectural sophistication? And what knowledge of geometry, astronomy, ritual practice, or social coordination has been lost to time, leaving only the silent testimony of stone and earth? In the quiet fields of Nouvelle-Aquitaine, as wind sweeps over the low mounds and shadows shift across the entrances to long-buried chambers, the Tumulus of Bougon invites reflection and wonder. It is a site that bridges the practical and the mystical, the laborious and the symbolic, preserving the ingenuity of a civilization that remains just beyond our complete understanding. And in that unresolved tension, a question lingers. How many aspects of human skill and knowledge, refined and replicated by generations, are encoded in these mounds, waiting silently for discovery, and how much of it is simply beyond replication, a testament to the ingenuity of a people whose methods we may never fully grasp? From the subtly contoured earthworks of the Tumulus of Bougon, where Neolithic communities etched their memory into stone and soil, our journey now crosses oceans and continents, moving deep into the heart of the Amazon basin. Here, along the cliffs and escarpments overlooking the winding tributaries of the Amazon River in Brazil, lie the Monte Alegre rock shelters, a series of prehistoric caves and overhangs whose walls are adorned with vivid rock art, mysterious carvings, and evidence of human habitation that stretches back thousands of years. Unlike the monumental earthworks and terraces we've seen before, Monte Alegre speaks quietly yet profoundly, its secrets hidden within shadowed recesses of stone and pigment. The first impression of the site is striking. The cliffs rise abruptly from the surrounding forest, their surfaces weathered and streaked with color. Beneath these natural overhangs, the shelters form protective alcoves, shielding fragile artwork from the elements while creating intimate spaces for habitation, ritual, or observation. The tropical canopy above filters sunlight, casting dappled shadows across the surfaces, making the painted figures shimmer in changing light. The immediacy of the space, the closeness of stone walls, the earthy smell of soil and mineral pigments, and the echo of distant wildlife creates an immersive connection between observer and environment. Archaeological investigations indicate that Monte Alegre was occupied as early as 11,000 years ago, during the late Pleistocene. Evidence of hearths, stone tools, and ceramic fragments suggests sustained human use over millennia, yet it is the rock art that continues to captivate both researchers and the imagination. Figures of animals, humans, and abstract symbols are rendered in striking red, white, and black pigments, sometimes overlaid across earlier images, forming a palimpsest of visual storytelling that spans generations. What knowledge, ritual, or narrative did these figures convey? And how was it transmitted and preserved across such vast stretches of time? The paintings themselves reveal remarkable technical skill. Some images depict animals in motion, their limbs carefully proportioned and positioned, demonstrating keen observation and artistic intention. Others are abstract or symbolic, lines, spirals, and geometric forms whose meaning remains obscure. Mainstream interpretations often propose ritualistic or communicative functions. The images could mark hunting territories, recount mythic events, or serve as objects of ceremonial significance. Yet the consistency, precision, and longevity of the art suggest more than simple decoration or functional notation. Could these shelters have been centers of knowledge, memory, or social cohesion, where visual culture encoded lessons, cosmology, or identity? Beyond the artistic mastery, the Monte Alegre shelters exhibit signs of architectural manipulation of space. Stones were sometimes arranged deliberately to create platforms or hearths, walls were modified, and floor surfaces compacted to support habitation. These interventions indicate sophisticated understanding of the environment, site selection, and durable human adaptation. How did early communities balance the imperatives of shelter, ritual, and artistic expression? What combination of observation, experimentation, and cultural tradition guided these interventions? One of the most intriguing aspects of the Monte Alegre rock art is its potential astronomical connection. Some researchers have proposed that certain images align with celestial events, sunrise on solstices, lunar cycles, or specific stellar configurations. If true, this implies a deep observational knowledge of the heavens, integrated directly into artistic expression. How did early Amazonian communities track these cycles? What tools, if any, aided in their observation? And how did they encode these observations in a medium as fluid and ephemeral as pigment on stone? Artifacts recovered from the shelters reveal a complex subsistence and cultural strategy. Stone points, scrapers, and grinding stones suggest hunting, processing, and food preparation. Ceramic fragments indicate evolving technological practices and social exchange. Yet the sheer scale of the rock art and its placement across multiple shelters implies a coordination of labor and intent beyond ordinary domestic life. Did these sites serve as communal centers, bringing together dispersed groups for ritual, instruction, or celebration? Or were they sacred spaces, reserved for specialized practitioners who maintained and transmitted cultural knowledge? The rock shelter's preservation, despite millennia of environmental change, adds to the mystery. The pigments remain vibrant, protected under overhangs, yet some areas show weathering, superimposition, and selective erasure, suggesting intentional modification or renewal. Were these changes purely accidental, or did the inhabitants actively manage the spaces to maintain meaning, ritual function, or social relevance over generations? Such intentionality would indicate long-term planning, cultural continuity, and sophisticated knowledge of material and environmental interaction. Knowledge remarkably difficult to replicate without similar ecological understanding and cultural context. Speculative interpretations further expand the intrigue. Some suggest that abstract geometric designs could encode early forms of symbolic communication, proto-writing or calendrical systems, while others posit shamanic or spiritual functions, where the act of painting and inhabiting the shelters was itself a ritual practice linking humans to landscape, animals, and cosmos. Could the shelters have functioned as both laboratory and theater for early Amazonian knowledge, a place where observation, artistry, and social cohesion intersected in a tangible, enduring form? Environmental context is critical to understanding the complexity of Monte Alegre. The shelters are situated within a floodplain ecosystem, yet elevated on cliffs that provide dry, secure habitation and excellent vantage points. The strategic selection of these sites reflects an intimate understanding of topography, seasonal variation, and resource availability. How did early communities integrate this ecological intelligence with artistic and ritual practices? And to what extent does the surviving evidence underrepresent the full extent of knowledge, observation, and cultural sophistication present at the site? Walking through the shelters today, one is struck by a profound sense of temporal layering. Hands long vanished placed pigment on stone, arranged hearths and crafted tools, yet their presence is palpable. Each brushstroke, each stone arrangement, speaks of deliberate effort, observation, and intention. The rock shelters preserve not only artifacts, but an experiential understanding of space, ritual, and representation, communicating a level of human sophistication that challenges modern assumptions. Monte Alegre confronts us with questions that remain unresolved. How did early Amazonian societies achieve such precision and continuity in artistic expression? What social structures enabled the transmission of knowledge over millennia? How did observation, ritual, and community labor converge to produce sites that endure as both functional spaces and repositories of symbolic meaning? And perhaps most provocatively, how much of this knowledge, of pigment preparation, spatial arrangement, ecological adaptation, and symbolic communication, is simply beyond our ability to replicate today? The Monte Alegre rock shelters are more than archaeological sites. They are living echoes of human ingenuity, artistry, and adaptation. They demonstrate skill in observation, coordination, and cultural expression, preserved in stone and pigment across the centuries. And yet, for all we have learned, the shelters retain their mystery, their full purpose, the intent of their creators, and the depth of knowledge encoded in their walls remain elusive. As shadows shift across the painted surfaces and sunlight filters through the cliff overhangs, we are reminded that human mastery, whether of landscape, stone, or symbolic representation, can endure in ways that continue to challenge, inspire, and puzzle us, leaving the past tantalizingly just out of reach, impossible to fully replicate, and waiting for future discovery. From the vibrant pigments and cliffside artistry of Monte Alegre, where early Amazonian communities left indelible traces of observation, ritual, and memory upon stone, our journey now ascends to the Andean highlands of Ecuador, where the sky stretches thin and the wind whispers across volcanic ridges. Here, nestled among the rugged hills and terraces of Cañar Province, lie the lesser structures of Ingapirca, a network of carefully arranged stones, walls, and platforms that remain overshadowed by the site's central Temple of the Sun, yet possess a subtle complexity that invites deeper scrutiny. At first glance, the Ingapirca lesser structures seem modest, almost unassuming compared to the grand semicircular temple that dominates the high plateau. Yet their careful placement, orientation, and construction reveal a sophistication that cannot be ignored. Low stone walls contour the slopes, enclosing terraces, small chambers, and narrow passageways. Some stones are finely cut, fitted with precision that resists easy replication, while others appear more rough-hewn, creating a contrast between utility and refinement. Standing among these formations, one feels the quiet deliberation of their creators, intentions encoded not in monumental spectacle, but in subtle geometry and enduring materiality. These smaller constructions are often overlooked, yet they speak volumes about Ingapirca's broader cultural and functional landscape. Archaeological evidence suggests they were used for habitation, storage, and perhaps ritual preparation, spaces that supported the daily and ceremonial life of the communities that thrived here. Terraces suggest agricultural adaptation to steep slopes, while walls and small enclosures indicate control over movement, property, or access. Yet, as with much of Ingapirca, the precision of construction raises questions. How were these stones quarried, transported, and fitted with such care in an environment both elevated and rugged? And what knowledge of load-bearing, erosion control, and spatial organization guided the placement of each element? Dating situates these structures within the broader Cañari and Inca presence in the highlands, roughly spanning from the 10th to the 16th centuries CE. While the Temple of the Sun often dominates study due to its ceremonial prominence, the lesser structures illuminate the practical and social dimensions of life at Ingapirca. They reflect not just labor and construction, but coordination over multiple generations, with knowledge of terrain, material properties, and environmental management transmitted orally or through apprenticeship. How did communities maintain continuity of practice across centuries, ensuring that each terrace, wall, and chamber contributed to a larger, cohesive plan? Some researchers propose that the arrangement of the lesser structures may have had ritual or astronomical significance. Certain terraces and walls align with solar or horizon markers, suggesting an integration of daily life, agriculture, and cosmological observation. Could these modest structures have functioned as calibration points for ceremonies, planting cycles, or celestial observation? The possibility that functional, domestic spaces were simultaneously embedded with symbolic or cosmological meaning challenges assumptions about the division between the mundane and the sacred in Andean societies. Construction techniques provide further intrigue. Stones are laid with remarkable attention to stability, often interlocking without mortar, yet positioned to resist seismic activity and erosion. Retaining walls support terraces at steep angles, while small enclosures are engineered to endure centuries of weathering. Such skill reflects a deep empirical understanding of materials, landscape, and environmental forces, knowledge that would be difficult to replicate without long-term observation, experimentation, and communal expertise. How were such techniques developed, preserved, and shared? And how much of this knowledge remains lost to time, hidden in the precise angles and placement of each stone? The social dimension of the lesser structures also invites reflection. These terraces and walls were not merely functional. They organized human activity, delineated spaces, and shaped movement. Small enclosures may have housed specialized crafts, stored surplus, or served as spaces for preparation before entering the temple precincts. Even in their modesty, they orchestrate the experience of place, subtly guiding interactions, labor, and ritual participation. What social or symbolic logic underpinned these arrangements? How did these structures reflect hierarchy, community identity, or ritual preparation in ways that are now invisible to us? Artifacts recovered from the area, ceramics, lithic tools, and remnants of agricultural activity, suggest that the lesser structures were integral to the broader economy and culture of Ingapirca. Yet their subtle complexity continues to challenge researchers. How did relatively small-scale communities manage labor, transport stone, and maintain the precision of terraces and enclosures without centralized, monumental oversight? And how did these structures complement the grand ceremonial architecture, forming a network of utility, social organization, and symbolic meaning that is difficult to reconstruct fully today? Speculative interpretations extend the mystery further. Some have suggested that the smaller terraces and walls may have functioned as teaching spaces, sites for ritual training, or even markers of astronomical observation that extended beyond the central temple. Others propose that these constructions were deliberately designed to integrate human labor, environmental adaptation, and social cohesion, creating a living architecture in which every stone contributed to the stability, rhythm, and identity of the community. Could the lesser structures have been as significant to the Dakari and Inca vision as the Temple of the Sun itself, conveying cultural knowledge through the built landscape? The environmental context enhances the challenge of replication. At over 3,000 meters above sea level, Ingapirca's terraces and walls were constructed in thin air, on steep volcanic slopes prone to erosion and seismic shifts. Builders had to manage material stability, gradient, and drainage, while shaping the terrain to serve both practical and symbolic purposes. Such expertise required not just labor, but empirical knowledge of geology, hydrology, and structural mechanics, an embodied intelligence difficult to replicate without intimate long-term engagement with the landscape. Walking among the lesser structures today, one is struck by their quiet power. Unlike grand temples, they demand attention to subtleties, the angle of a wall, the interlocking of stones, the level of a terrace. Yet these subtleties are precisely what preserve the ingenuity of their builders. Each wall, chamber, and terrace demonstrates labor, observation, and cultural continuity that is nearly impossible to replicate without knowledge now lost to centuries. They embody both utility and intention, blending the practical, social, and symbolic in ways that still elude full comprehension. Ingapirca's lesser structures challenge assumptions about how societies in rugged highland environments organized space, labor, and ritual life. They reveal mastery of engineering, adaptation, and planning that is easily overlooked but deeply impressive. And in their quiet, enduring presence, they pose a question that resonates across millennia. How much of the knowledge, skill, and cultural intention encoded in these walls, terraces, and enclosures remains hidden from us? How many lessons of spatial intelligence, community coordination, and environmental mastery are preserved here? Impossible to replicate, yet waiting silently to be rediscovered. From the Andean highlands of Ingapirca, where terraces and modest stone enclosures reveal communities harmonizing labor, ritual, and environmental mastery, our journey descends now into the fertile river valleys of central Peru, where the Huallaga and Utcubamba rivers converge. Here lies Kotosh, a site whose stone architecture predates the Incas by millennia, and yet hints at the sophistication of a civilization whose purpose, precision, and symbolic insight remain tantalizingly elusive. Unlike the ceremonial grandeur of later Andean centers, Kotosh speaks in quiet, deliberate lines, a whisper of human ingenuity preserved beneath layers of earth and time. The first impression of Kotosh is subtle, almost unassuming. From the surrounding terraces and gentle hills, the site presents a low, rectangular platform, partially covered by soil and modern vegetation. Yet, upon closer inspection, the regularity of the stone walls becomes apparent. Carefully cut blocks, fitted without mortar, forming chambers that are compact yet geometrically precise. The architectural rhythm, parallel walls, right angles, and aligned entrances, suggests deliberate planning and a sophisticated understanding of space. Every wall and chamber conveys a sense of order, not for ostentation, but for function and possibly for ritual significance. Dating places Kotosh as early as 2500 BCE, during the pre-ceramic and early formative periods of Andean history, making it one of the oldest known stone complexes in the region. The site is best known for the Temple of the Crossed Hands, where stone carvings of interlaced hands adorn the walls, their meaning still debated. Yet surrounding this central chamber are lesser rooms and enclosures, whose purposes remain ambiguous but whose precision suggests careful design. What drove these early builders to invest such labor into stonework at a time when wood and adobe were the predominant building materials? How did they achieve alignment, stability, and spatial coherence over multiple generations? Excavations reveal that Kotosh was not a single-purpose structure. Hearths, storage pits, and ritual spaces are interspersed, indicating a combination of domestic, ceremonial, and perhaps educational functions. The repeated reconstruction and layering of floors suggests that the site was used and reused over centuries, with successive communities maintaining and modifying its architecture. How did knowledge of construction techniques and ritual practices transmit across generations without written language? What social structures supported long-term labor coordination in such an early period? The stone construction itself is remarkable. Blocks are carefully shaped to fit together with minimal gaps, and some corners are beveled with precision, resisting the shifting of soil and seismic activity. For a pre-ceramic society, achieving such durability and structural integrity requires advanced empirical knowledge. How did these early builders understand load distribution, stability, and environmental adaptation, seemingly without formal engineering methods? And why did they choose stone, durable but labor-intensive, over more readily available materials? The Temple of the Crossed Hands, though the centerpiece, raises further questions when considered alongside the surrounding architecture. The carved hands are stylized and abstract, yet their placement within the stone walls suggests deliberate symbolic intention. Were they protective symbols, expressions of communal identity, or references to spiritual cosmology? And what relationship existed between these carvings and the broader layout of the complex, including the alignment of walls, entrances, and surrounding terraces? Could the architecture itself have encoded cultural narratives or cosmological knowledge that guided ritual, agriculture, or social cohesion? Beyond the symbolic, Kotosh demonstrates practical sophistication. Terraces and retaining walls indicate environmental adaptation, managing rainfall, soil stability, and access across uneven terrain. Chambers are elevated, floors compacted, and hearths positioned for ventilation, suggesting an understanding of microclimate and human comfort. Such considerations imply careful observation, trial and error experimentation, and long-term knowledge retention. How was this expertise preserved and transmitted without written records? And to what extent does the surviving architecture represent only a fraction of the complex's original sophistication, perhaps with lost wood or perishable elements that augmented its function and meaning? Speculative interpretations invite deeper reflection. Some researchers propose that Kotosh's layout may have incorporated early astronomical observation, with walls and chambers aligned to solstices or prominent stars. Others suggest that the complex was a site of ritualized instruction, where apprentices learned sacred or practical knowledge within the confines of carefully organized space. Could Kotosh have functioned as both temple and school, where architecture itself was a medium for teaching and preserving cultural memory? The combination of precision, labor, and symbolic intent suggests that early Andean societies were capable of far more complex planning than often assumed. The environmental context underscores the challenge of replication. Kotosh sits in a river valley prone to seasonal floods, yet the builders established terraces, elevated floors, and drainage systems that allowed structures to endure for millennia. The knowledge required to adapt construction to local geology, hydrology, and climate is subtle and empirical, accumulated through long-term observation and refined practice. Could modern engineers, armed with technology, replicate the precision, stability, and durability achieved by these early builders using only the tools and techniques available at the time? The answer is not straightforward. Walking through Kotosh today, one is struck by the layered intentionality embedded in every wall and floor. Stone blocks fitted to resist shifting, carved motifs echoing human presence, terraces guiding movement across the valley. They all testify to a culture that valued labor, observation, and the careful orchestration of space. There is a quiet mastery here, one that transcends aesthetics and functionality, hinting at a worldview where architecture, ritual, and daily life were inseparably intertwined. Kotosh challenges assumptions about the origins of monumental architecture in the Andes. It demonstrates that even in pre-ceramic societies, humans possessed the ability to coordinate labor, manipulate materials, and encode meaning into stone with precision that seems nearly impossible to replicate today. And yet, despite centuries of study, the full purpose, method, and knowledge behind Kotosh remain elusive. How were these builders able to integrate durability, symbolism, and environmental adaptation in such early constructions? What rituals, beliefs, or social structures underpinned their work? And what other secrets, now hidden beneath floors, terraces, and soil, still await discovery? The site stands as a quiet monument to ingenuity, persistence, and the human capacity for creating enduring works of knowledge and meaning. Every stone, every floor, and every carved hand invites reflection, offering evidence of mastery that is practical, symbolic, and profoundly human. And in its silent endurance, Kotosh leaves us with a question that resonates across millennia. How much of this early Andean sophistication is truly beyond replication, preserved in stone and memory, waiting for future generations to uncover the methods, insights, and intentions that remain hidden from our grasp? From the highland terraces and stone chambers of Kotosh, where early Andean societies embedded ritual, habitation, and environmental mastery into enduring architecture, our exploration now carries us across continents and seas to the eastern Mediterranean, where the island of Cyprus emerges from the azure waters of the Levantine Sea. Here, in the fertile plains and rolling hills near the village of Khirokitia, lie the enigmatic structures of Khirokitia, a Neolithic settlement whose circular stone houses, compact layout, and enduring walls whisper of a sophisticated culture whose methods, social organization, and architectural skill remain partially beyond our comprehension. Approaching Khirokitia, the first impression is one of quiet order. The site occupies a gentle slope overlooking the Moroni River Valley, with clusters of circular dwellings arranged in deliberate sequences. Each house is constructed from carefully placed limestone blocks, forming thick walls that curve into perfect circles, some with diameters exceeding 6 meters. The stones are often dry-fitted, their arrangement remarkably stable, capable of enduring millennia of weathering, earthquakes, and human activity. The precision of the masonry, achieved without mortar or modern tools, immediately signals a mastery of material and technique that belies the settlement's Neolithic context. The dwellings themselves are astonishing in both form and function. Interiors reveal low platforms, hearths, and niches, suggesting highly organized domestic spaces. Some walls contain small recesses, perhaps used for storage, ritual offerings, or sleeping platforms. Externally, the houses are tightly clustered, with narrow pathways weaving between them, creating an intimate communal layout. The overall plan suggests careful urban planning, where social interaction, privacy, and defense were subtly balanced. How did early Khirokitian communities conceptualize space, coordinate construction, and maintain such structural coherence across generations? Dating situates Khirokitia between approximately 7,000 and 6,000 BCE, making it one of the earliest known permanent settlements in the eastern Mediterranean. The settlement flourished during a period when humans were transitioning from nomadic hunter-gatherer lifeways to sedentary agricultural societies. Yet Khirokitia stands out not merely for permanence, but for the sophistication of its architecture. Circular dwellings, carefully leveled floors, and stone platforms suggest a level of spatial intelligence, labor coordination, and environmental adaptation that challenges conventional assumptions about Neolithic capabilities. How did small communities achieve such consistency in construction, and what knowledge systems were employed to guide the process? The settlement's layout further amplifies the mystery. Houses are often arranged in tight concentric patterns, forming clusters that may indicate family units, social hierarchy, or communal planning. Some researchers have noted alignments with cardinal directions, though the purpose of these orientations remains speculative. Were these alignments practical, optimizing sunlight, ventilation, or drainage, or symbolic, reflecting cosmological beliefs and social organization? The interplay of functionality and potential symbolic meaning demonstrates a sophisticated understanding of space that continues to puzzle archaeologists today. Construction techniques are equally remarkable. Stones are meticulously selected and shaped to interlock, creating walls that resist collapse. Roofs, likely composed of perishable materials such as timber and reeds, have vanished, yet their attachment points and support niches suggest careful planning to balance weight and stability. Hearths are precisely located to provide warmth, cooking facilities, and ventilation. The integration of domestic and structural knowledge points to a cultural mastery that combined empirical observation with intergenerational learning. How did knowledge of masonry, construction sequencing, and environmental adaptation develop, and how was it reliably transmitted in a society without written language? Artifacts recovered from Khirokitia offer further insight into the sophistication of its inhabitants. Pottery, groundstone tools, and figurines suggest both utilitarian and ritual activity. The presence of carefully curated objects within the dwellings indicates a culture attentive to domestic order, symbolic practice, and perhaps social stratification. Could the placement of objects, the orientation of dwellings, and the clustering of houses have encoded social rules or cosmological understanding in ways now lost to us? How much of the community's intelligence was embedded not in texts, but in the very arrangement of stone and earth? Speculative interpretations invite even deeper contemplation. Some researchers suggest that Khirokitia's compact circular architecture may have facilitated community cohesion, ritualized gathering, or cooperative labor. Others propose that the arrangement of houses could reflect an early form of urban planning, anticipating principles of circulation, defense, and social hierarchy. Could the geometric precision, communal clustering, and environmental adaptation of Khirokitia represent a lost system of knowledge that blended daily survival, social order, and spiritual practice into one integrated, enduring design? The environmental context of Khirokitia adds to the wonder. Situated on a river terrace in a Mediterranean climate, the settlement required careful management of water, soil, and food resources. Terraces and compact house clusters may have mitigated soil erosion, optimized land use, and supported agricultural productivity. How did early Khirokitian communities combine environmental observation with construction expertise to create structures that were both resilient and sustainable over centuries? And to what degree were these architectural decisions intertwined with ritual or cosmological considerations, shaping not only practical life, but the spiritual experience of place? Walking among the ruins today, one senses the cumulative effort embedded in every stone circle. The curves of walls, the alignment of hearths, the careful spacing of dwellings, all testify to labor, observation, and cultural continuity. The houses themselves are monuments to planning, craft, and human ingenuity, yet their full meaning remains obscured. How did early architects balance the practical needs of shelter, social interaction, and environmental adaptation with intangible aspects of ritual, identity, and cosmology? What lessons were encoded in walls, platforms, and clustering strategies that are now invisible to us? Khirokitia challenges assumptions about early sedentary societies. It demonstrates that humans, even in preceramic contexts, possessed sophisticated spatial intelligence, environmental mastery, and social organization. It shows that architecture can serve as a repository of knowledge, skill, and intention, preserved in stone for millennia. Yet it also underscores the limits of our understanding. How much of this knowledge, construction techniques, social coordination, ritual practice, is irretrievably lost? How much remains hidden in the arrangement of stone, the layering of floors, or the orientation of houses? The settlement's endurance, despite millennia of erosion, agriculture, and human activity, emphasizes its extraordinary durability and the skill of its builders. Each circular house, each carefully placed stone, whispers of human ingenuity that is both practical and symbolic, crafted by communities whose worldview, method, and cultural memory remain tantalizingly inaccessible. And in this quiet testimony, Khirokitia leaves us with a question as compelling as the stone circles themselves. How much of what we see, so meticulously constructed, is simply beyond replication today? A record of human mastery that we can admire and study, but may never fully recreate or understand. From the circular stone houses of Khirokitia, where Neolithic communities etched their social, ritual, and environmental knowledge into enduring masonry, our journey now carries us to the rugged western edge of Europe. where the Atlantic Ocean crashes against limestone cliffs and windswept hills. Here, perched dramatically on the edge of Inishmore, the largest of Ireland's Aran Islands, stands Dun Aengus, a prehistoric fort whose imposing stone walls curve along cliff tops, facing a void that seems to merge earth and sky. Its location alone arrests the imagination, a vast, enclosed space suspended between land and ocean, a monument of stone whose purpose and construction defy simple explanation. Approaching Dun Aengus, the first impression is one of monumental scale and audacious placement. The fort consists of concentric semicircular walls built with massive limestone blocks, some weighing several tons, carefully fitted without mortar. The outermost wall follows the contour of the cliff's edge, forming an almost perfect arc that frames the Atlantic horizon. The interior terraces descend in steps toward the fort's heart, forming enclosures whose function has been the subject of debate for generations. The cliffs drop sharply beyond the walls, creating a natural defense that amplifies the architectural drama. The builders deliberately chose a site that is as visually striking as it is strategically precarious. Dun Aengus is generally dated to the late Bronze Age, roughly 1100 to 800 BCE, though the earliest occupation may extend even further back. Mainstream archaeology interprets the site as a defensive fortification, a ceremonial enclosure, or a combination of both. Yet the scale and precision of the construction raise questions. Transporting massive limestone blocks to the cliff edge, shaping them for tight fitting, and arranging walls that follow the natural contours of the terrain would have required not only extraordinary effort, but an intimate knowledge of geology, weight distribution, and human coordination. How did communities achieve such feats with only rudimentary tools and no modern engineering knowledge? The fort's concentric design also invites speculation about social organization and ritual. 3 primary walls enclose the central area, with smaller terraces and platforms within. The alignment and spacing of these walls suggest intentional planning, perhaps reflecting status, defensive strategy, or symbolic hierarchy. Could the arrangement encode a social or cosmological order, where each enclosure represented a level of access, ritual significance, or social rank? The precision of the construction implies both long-term planning and cultural continuity, yet without written records, the reasoning behind these choices remains obscured. One of the most striking features of Dun Aengus is its cliff-edge placement. The fort sits atop a limestone plateau, overlooking a sheer drop to the ocean below. From this vantage point, visibility stretches for miles, yet the effort required to transport and position massive stones in such a location suggests the site was deliberately monumental, not just utilitarian. Was it primarily defensive, protecting inhabitants from rivals, or was the location symbolic, intended to demonstrate power, command the landscape, or align with celestial phenomena? Some researchers propose that the fort may have had ritual significance, where the edge of the world, or the edge of land itself, was used as a liminal space, a boundary between human life and the vast unknowable sea. The craftsmanship of the walls is equally compelling. Stones are fitted tightly without mortar, forming structures that have withstood centuries of Atlantic storms, frost, and erosion. The builders used irregularly shaped blocks, yet achieved stability and cohesion, demonstrating knowledge of weight distribution, interlocking forms, and the durability of materials. This level of skill is remarkable for the period and environment. How did ancient builders experiment with stone placement, trial and error, and communal knowledge to achieve structures that endure, perched on a cliff edge exposed to relentless weather? Excavations within the fort have revealed hearths, post holes, and fragments of pottery, suggesting domestic, defensive, or ceremonial use. Yet the evidence is fragmentary, leaving much to interpretation. Were the terraces used to house people, store resources, or stage ritual events? Were the walls primarily practical, symbolic, or both? And if the fort was built for defense, who were they protecting themselves from in such an isolated location? The answers remain elusive, hidden behind layers of stone, soil, and time. Speculative perspectives deepen the intrigue. Some researchers propose that Dun Aengus may have functioned as a ritualized ceremonial space, where the dramatic cliff edge and concentric walls created a theater of human and cosmic interaction. Others suggest astronomical alignments, with certain walls or terraces oriented to solstices or equinoxes, implying a sophisticated understanding of celestial cycles. Could the builders have combined defense, habitation, ritual, and observation into a single integrated design, encoding knowledge in stone that was both practical and symbolic? Environmental context is critical to appreciating the fort's ingenuity. The limestone cliffs of Inishmore are unforgiving, with limited soil for construction, exposure to wind and rain, and sharp elevation changes. Yet the builders adapted expertly, selecting terraces, shaping stone, and integrating the natural topography into the fort's design. How did they balance stability, durability, and accessibility in such a challenging landscape? And what knowledge, now lost, enabled them to manipulate massive stone and terrain with such precision? Walking along the walls of Dun Aengus today, the scale and placement of the stones impress profoundly. The cliffs drop away into the Atlantic, the wind carrying the distant roar of waves, and every curve of the wall demonstrates deliberate planning, communal effort, and aesthetic sensibility. The site communicates both practicality and symbolism, labor and vision, yet leaves its deepest intentions unanswered. How did the builders conceive of the project, coordinate effort, and transmit knowledge of construction techniques across generations? And what other functions, social, ceremonial, or astronomical, are hidden in the placement of stones, the design of terraces, or the positioning of the fort itself? Dun Aengus challenges assumptions about prehistoric engineering, social organization, and human ambition. Its construction combines audacity, precision, and environmental adaptation that would be difficult to replicate even today without modern tools and engineering knowledge. And yet, for all its grandeur and ingenuity, the fort retains its mystery. What drove communities to undertake such an enormous effort on a cliff edge? How much of their knowledge of stone placement, structural stability, ritual function, or landscape mastery is encoded in the fort, but remains inaccessible to us? As the Atlantic wind sweeps across the ramparts, carrying salt and spray over walls that have endured millennia, Dun Aengus stands as a testament to human ingenuity, vision, and perseverance. It demonstrates skill, planning, and environmental mastery that are remarkable by any standard, yet its full purpose and meaning remain beyond our grasp. In the quiet majesty of the cliffside fort, one cannot help but wonder how many secrets of construction, ritual, and observation lie hidden within the stones of Dun Aengus, impossible to replicate, and waiting silently for those who come to seek them. From the wind-swept cliffs and cliff-edge fortifications of Dun Aengus, where human ingenuity meets the raw forces of nature, we move now across the Irish Sea to the island of Anglesey, Wales, where the land is gentler, cloaked in verdant fields and stone-laden hills, yet the mysteries it holds are no less profound. Here lies Bryn Celli, a Neolithic passage tomb whose stones have stood for over 5,000 years, their quiet presence belying the sophistication of construction, astronomical alignment, and ritual purpose. Unlike the imposing cliff-edge drama of Dun Aengus, Bryn Celli speaks with subtlety. Its power lies in shadow, light, and the deliberate orchestration of space. Approaching the site, one immediately senses the intentionality of its placement. A low mound rises gently from the surrounding field, encircled by remnants of a stone curb. The entrance is carefully aligned, leading into a narrow passageway flanked by upright stones that guide the visitor toward the inner chamber. The passage stretches some 6 meters, culminating in a small, stone-lined burial chamber that once housed cremated remains. The simplicity of form belies a precision of purpose. Light and shadow move through the passage in ways that seem almost deliberate, touching the inner chamber at specific times of the year. Bryn Celli is widely dated to around 3,300 BCE, though earlier activity on the site may extend back another millennium. Archaeologists classify it as a passage tomb, yet it defies easy categorization. The entrance and passage are oriented so that during the summer solstice, sunlight penetrates the narrow corridor and illuminates the back wall of the chamber, highlighting the deliberate alignment between human construction and celestial cycles. This architectural choreography, designed to mark the turning of the year, invites reflection on the knowledge and observational skill possessed by Neolithic communities. How did they track the sun with such accuracy? And how was this understanding encoded into stone and soil, long before the advent of written records or sophisticated tools? The chamber itself is intimate and deliberate. Upright slabs support horizontal capstones, forming a corbelled roof that conveys both stability and permanence. The size of the chamber suggests a controlled, focused experience. Those who entered would have been enveloped by stone, separated from the outside world, and made aware of the deliberate intersection between architecture and natural light. Could this have been a space of ritual initiation, astronomical observation, or ancestral veneration? The Neolithic builders left no inscriptions, no written record of intention, yet the precision of construction communicates purpose in a language of stone and shadow. Artifacts recovered from Bryn Celli provide further insight. Cremated remains, pottery fragments, and stone tools suggest ceremonial activity alongside mortuary use. Yet the alignment, the corbelled roof, and the careful orientation of the passage imply that the site was not simply functional. It is a monument to knowledge and observation, where the movements of the sun across the sky were encoded into architecture, perhaps marking time, seasons, or cosmological belief. Could the builders have understood more about celestial mechanics than we can readily measure from the remnants today? The surrounding landscape enhances the sense of mystery. The mound is located amidst fertile fields, with other Neolithic monuments dotting the vicinity, suggesting a complex network of sites tied together by ritual, social cohesion, or cosmological alignment. Some researchers propose that the placement of Bryn Celli in this landscape allowed the observation of specific solar, lunar, or stellar events, integrating the tomb into a broader system of knowledge. Was this mound merely a local shrine or part of a regional network encoding astronomical and social intelligence across the land? The construction techniques are striking. Large stones were transported, shaped, and fitted into place with remarkable precision, creating a passage and chamber capable of withstanding millennia of weathering. The builders used dry stone corbelling to span the chamber roof, demonstrating an empirical understanding of weight distribution and structural stability. How did communities with limited technological resources achieve such feats? And what knowledge of geometry, proportion, and material properties did they possess? Knowledge that seems almost impossible to replicate without similar long-term experience and observation. Speculative interpretations add another layer of intrigue. Some researchers suggest that Bryn Celli functioned as a ritual calendar, marking seasonal transitions and providing a framework for agricultural or ceremonial planning. Others propose that the passageway itself was symbolic, representing a journey from life to death, from the external world into a sacred interior. Could the interplay of sunlight and shadow have been intended to animate these rituals, creating ephemeral experiences that reinforced cultural knowledge across generations? The subtlety and precision of the design suggest a level of intentionality and sophistication that resonates with a quiet mastery of observation, construction, and meaning. Walking through the passage today, one is struck by the interplay of light, stone, and space. The walls rise steadily, the passage narrows, and the chamber seems to embrace the visitor, isolating them from the surrounding landscape while connecting them to celestial rhythms. The tomb is both modest and extraordinary, a testament to observation, skill, and social organization. Every stone and slab communicates careful planning, a mastery of materials, and a cultural understanding of time, space, and ritual. Bryn Celli challenges assumptions about Neolithic societies. It demonstrates that even communities without writing, metallurgy, or advanced tools could construct monuments of precision, durability, and astronomical sophistication. And yet, despite millennia of study, the full purpose, method, and cultural knowledge behind the passage tomb remain elusive. How much of the site's significance, its construction techniques, ritual function, and astronomical intent is lost to history? And how much of this early mastery is preserved in a way that is impossible to fully replicate today, leaving the tomb as a silent witness to human ingenuity, observation, and the enduring mystery of Neolithic life? As the sun rises and light begins to enter the narrow corridor, illuminating the back wall of the chamber, Bryn Celli stands as a quiet monument to the ingenuity, observation, and ritual imagination of a people who understood the sky, the seasons, and the enduring power of stone. And yet, its full secrets remain just out of reach, waiting to be sensed, studied, and quietly wondered at by those who follow in their footsteps. From the sunlit fields and shadowed corridors of Bryn Celli, where Neolithic builders aligned passage and stone to the rhythms of the sun, our exploration now moves south to the rolling plains of southern Spain, near the town of Antequera, where the Dolmen of Menga rises in solemn grandeur, a megalithic tomb that has stood for over 5,000 years. Unlike the carefully orchestrated light and shadow of Bryn Celli, Menga impresses with sheer scale and audacity. Massive stones, some weighing over 180 tons, arranged with astonishing precision to form a corridor and chamber that dwarf modern imagination and challenge modern engineering. Approaching Menga, one is immediately struck by its monumental presence. The dolmen's corridor stretches nearly 27 meters, leading to a large rectangular chamber, whose ceiling is supported by massive horizontal capstones. These stones are dry-fitted, placed without mortar, yet they interlock in a way that has withstood millennia of weather, seismic activity, and human disturbance. The surrounding landscape is equally remarkable. Menga sits at the foot of the Peña de los Enamorados, a steep limestone mountain whose silhouette rises dramatically against the horizon, forming a natural backdrop that appears deliberately integrated into the dolmen's orientation. How did the builders select, transport, and position these enormous stones with the tools and resources of the Neolithic? And why did they choose this precise location, linking tomb and mountain in a silent dialogue of stone and landscape? Dating places the construction of Menga around 3,500 to 3000 BCE during the Copper Age, making it one of the largest and oldest known megalithic structures in Europe. Excavations have revealed human remains, ceramics, and symbolic objects, suggesting a dual function as a burial site and ceremonial space. Yet these findings only hint at the complexity of the dolmen, the precision of construction, the scale of the stones, and the alignment with the natural landscape all suggest knowledge, organization, and intent far beyond what casual observation might suggest. How could a society without wheel transport, cranes, or written records orchestrate such a monumental feat? The architecture itself is astonishing. The corridor is constructed with massive orthostats, upright stones, carefully spaced and topped with capstones that form a stable roof. The chamber at the far end is proportionally monumental, creating an enclosed space that would have evoked both awe and intimacy. Each stone bears traces of careful selection and placement. Some are split and shaped, others left rough, yet together they create a coherent, enduring structure. What knowledge guided the shaping, placement, and interlocking of stones to achieve stability over 5 millennia? And how much of that knowledge was empirical, developed over generations through observation, trial, and communal practice? Menga's alignment adds another layer of mystery. Unlike many dolmens that orient toward solstices or celestial events, the corridor points toward the Peña de los Enamorados. Some researchers suggest this may symbolize a connection between the tomb and the mountain's natural presence, perhaps for ritual, cosmological, or territorial purposes. The mountain's dramatic profile, visible from miles away, may have served as a celestial or spiritual marker, integrating natural and built landscapes into a cohesive, symbolic statement. Was the orientation purely symbolic, or did it encode practical information about seasons, territory, or ritual practices? Transporting the stones remains a compelling puzzle. The orthostats and capstones are quarried from local limestone, yet some weigh tens or hundreds of tons, far exceeding what one might expect for Neolithic logistics. Researchers have proposed sledges, rollers, and coordinated human labor. Yet even with these methods, the feat seems nearly impossible. How did communities calculate leverage, balance, and effort to position stones with such precision? And how did social organizations support the coordination of hundreds, perhaps thousands, of people for construction projects that spanned decades or generations? Speculative interpretations deepen the intrigue. Some suggest that Menga was designed to function as more than a burial chamber. Perhaps it was a space for ritualized gatherings, seasonal ceremonies, or celestial observation. Could the placement of the dolmen within the landscape, its monumental scale, and its internal spatial experience have served to convey social cohesion, reinforce status hierarchies, or encode sacred knowledge? The combination of practicality, monumentality, and symbolic integration hints at a level of societal sophistication that is difficult to replicate even today. Environmental context amplifies the wonder. Menga occupies a limestone plain at the base of a towering mountain, an area prone to seismic activity and erosion over millennia. Yet the dolmen remains intact, its corridor and chamber holding steady, demonstrating a profound understanding of material stability, load distribution, and structural resilience. How did Neolithic builders anticipate forces that would act on their constructions centuries later? And to what extent does the surviving dolmen represent only a portion of the original landscape of megalithic knowledge, now partially lost to time? Walking through the corridor today, one feels the weight of stone and time, the careful selection of each block, and the deliberate rhythm of space. The experience is both intimate and monumental. The walls constrain, the ceiling impresses, and the passage draws one toward the chamber, evoking contemplation, ritual, or awe. Menga communicates a message in stone, a mastery of labor, observation, and design that persists across millennia. Yet the full intention behind that message remains shrouded. Dolmen of Menga challenges assumptions about Neolithic societies. It demonstrates remarkable planning, engineering, and social coordination, yet its construction is nearly impossible to replicate with contemporary tools and knowledge, highlighting a level of sophistication that continues to fascinate. How did these early communities balance utility, monumentality, and symbolism? How much of their social, spiritual, and architectural knowledge is lost to history, encoded only in stone and landscape? As sunlight touches the massive capstones and casts long shadows across the corridor, the Dolmen of Menga stands as a silent testament to human ambition, ingenuity, and mystery. Each orthostat and capstone, each spatial decision and alignment, speaks of a culture capable of extraordinary achievement, yet one whose full knowledge is now beyond reach. How much remains hidden, encoded in the stone, the landscape, or the intent of its builders, waiting for those willing to walk its passage and ponder its enduring enigma?